Chapter 620. No one could answer his question. What was the big picture? This had always been a simple yet complicated question. It was simple and clear at a glance, but it was so complicated that it could change at any time. The overall situation of Zhongzhou state was stability, unity, and anything else. It didn't really matter. The important thing was to look at the big picture. When this sentence was said, it would definitely hurt the interests of a certain person or a certain force. Therefore, in the hearts of those who were sacrificed or were forced to sacrifice, the so-called big picture was compromise. Li Tianlan did not want to compromise. Therefore, it didn't matter whose overall situation it was. The important thing was that he would not compromise. Impudent, bastard, little bastard. Tang Wansen's voice became a little vague because of his excitement. He kept thinking in a furious voice. He stared at Li Tianlan with resentment in his eyes and gnashed his teeth. If I had known this, I would have arrested all the traitors of the Li family and executed them. Li Tianlan looked at him, his eyes still gentle. You talk too much. Tang Wansen glared at him, looking as if he wanted to bite Li Tianlan to death. No one said a word. Li Tianlan might not know why Tang Wansen was so extreme, but everyone present knew what was going on when they saw Tang Wansen's invitation list for this meeting. Tang clan was a major clan in Yuzhou province. Although it was not the top clan, it would never be looked down upon. Tang clan in Yuzhou province could be regarded as one of the most powerful branches of Tang clan of Beihai. Tang clan of Beihai was second to none in the world, not only in Zhongzhou state. Tang Shi, the daughter of the Tang family, was the fiancée of Wang Xiao, the heir of the Wang family of Beihai. At a young age, she had begun to control the economic power of the Wang family of Beihai. Tang Wansen was a very ambitious person. Over the years, because of his ambition, the relationship between the Tang family of Yuzhou and the Tang family of Beihai had been very subtle. He had served as the deputy commander of the Beihai Corps, the deputy secretary general of the army headquarters of Zhongzhou state, and the deputy minister. Before he left office many years ago, he had wanted to compete with Qi Baitsong for the position of the minister of the standing minister. With his age and experience at that time, it was not impossible. However, in the end he still couldn't suppress Qi Baitsong and had no choice but to leave the military after losing the competition. The reason for his departure from the army was very complicated. To put it in perspective, the aftermath of the Li Consortium's treason case had not yet been settled. The Southeast Group was busy reorganizing its internal affairs and had no time to expand. In addition to this reason, the Tang family of Beihai did not give him enough support. From that moment on, the relationship between the Tang family of Yuzhou and the Tang family of Beihai was almost frozen. There was no doubt that he held a grudge against the Tang Corps and even against Mount Dibing. The immense resentment made him change his choice without batting an eyelid. He began to approach Wang Qinglei and successfully obtained Wang Qinglei's promise. The next generation of the Tang family was generally quite mediocre, but Tang Wansen was still filled with hope for the family. He had placed the future of the family in the hands of his son-in-law, and his son-in-law was extremely outstanding. Before he even reached middle age, he had already become a high-ranking member of the North Sea Legion and a trusted aide to Wang Qinglei, so Tang Wansen was very pleased with himself. Afterward, then his son-in-law died. He died in Li Tianlan's hands during his trip to Eastern Europe. Chen Qinglan, the former vice-marshal of the Snowdance Corps, was Tang Wansen's son-in-law. For the Tang family, this hatred was absolutely irreconcilable. In the chaos of curses, Tang Wansen stared at Li Tianlan and said vaguely, "Little bastard, when you die in Mount Dibing, the whole Li family will be buried with you." At that moment, Li Tianlan's eyes narrowed slightly. His expression was still calm, but a kind of looming danger directly spread to the whole conference room. His eyes were quiet, but they were as sharp as a knife, shining in all directions. He turned his eyes away from Tang Wansen, looked at the audience, and repeated the question he had asked several times, "Who can tell me what the overall situation is?" Still, no one spoke. At this moment, Li Tianlan was calm. But in everyone's opinion, he was like a madman. He was indeed crazy. If not, how could he go to Mount Dibing? "You little, all right?" Li Huaqing's voice suddenly sounded, interrupting Tang Wansen's curses. He frowned, glanced at several counselors and giants of the Southeast group, and said slowly, "Mr. Tang, pay attention to your wording. Comrade Tianlan is the marshal of Zhongzhou State. Whatever he does, he should have a reasonable explanation. I hope everyone can restrain themselves." The corner of Tang Wansen's mouth moved, and he subconsciously glanced at Wang Qinglei not far away. Wang Qinglei's face was still a little pale. He bowed his head and drank tea calmly. Tang Wansen quieted down and stopped talking. "Well, gentlemen, tell me about your Mount Dibbing." Li Huacheng looked at Li Tianlan and asked indifferently. There was a touch of warmth in Li Tianlan's eyes. "This chapter is not over. Please turn the page." After he joined the giant group, his relationship with the academics was so delicate. At least at this time, Li Huacheng's seemingly indifferent attitude was actually to find a way out for him. But he didn't need these things. From the second he entered the conference room, Li Tianlan had made up his mind. He stood on this stage, and he would not go down unless he died. "I've already told you the reason," he said softly. "Wang Tianzong has to give me an explanation about the Devil Troop, the loss of the Snowdance Corps, and his cooperation with Rothschild." "Marshal Li, what you said is groundless. There is no evidence, so it's not a reason." Yi Dongxing's voice was cold. Li Tianlan smiled, looked at Yi Dongxing, and said expressionlessly, "Not a reason? So what?" Yi Dongxing froze for a moment and suddenly couldn't say a word. Yes, even if it was not a reason, so what? He had already said that it was not enough if the reason was not enough, but he didn't want to look for it anymore. He just wanted to go to Mount Dibbing. It didn't matter what the reason was, he just wanted to go to Mount Dibbing. No matter whether everyone accepted it or not. Marshal Li, no one can deny it, and no one is qualified to deny it. The stability of Zhongzhou State is above everything else. Qi Beizong slowly raised his head and looked at Li Tianlan with sharp eyes. "No one thinks you are going to Mount Dibbing for tea based on your current attitude." Li Tianlan looked at him, squinted, and said, What do you mean by A gentle and amused voice rang out unhurriedly. There were many meanings. This word was very interesting. With the rise and fall of the tone, it could express different emotions. But it was the first time that someone asked it face to face. Li Tianlan turned his head and looked over. That was the middle of the conference room. Beside Li Huacheng was Qin Fangqing. Li Tianlan looked at them one by one and finally stopped at the fifth position. Zhongzhou State Council, Minister Ji Wenzhang of the Ministry of Supervision looked at him with a smile and waited for his answer. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth. The Southeast group used to be very big, and so did the Li family. Li Honghe used to have high standards. At that time, among the camp of the Li family in the Southeast group, Li Honghe was most optimistic about two people in the political circle. One was Wu Jingmin, and the other was Ji Wenzhang. During the more than 20 years when the Li family fell into the dust, Ji Wenzhang, who had always been regarded as the confidant of the Li family, had been rising rapidly and finally became a giant. Li Tianlan nodded and said, There was no way to talk on this day. Ji Wenzhang was stunned for a moment, then shook his head with a smile and said with emotion, "You are still too young and full of vigor. Tianlan, I don't recommend you to go to Mount Dibbing, because no matter what the result is, it will destroy the overall situation of Zhongzhou State. It's not appropriate." Vice President Wan Qingyun, who had always been with Ji Wenzhang, said briefly, "Why do you need to prove something that doesn't exist?" Wang Qinglei said in a light tone, "I don't agree with Marshal Li going to Mount Dibbing." Yi Dongxing directly expressed his attitude. "Young man, it's better to be steady." Chen Fangqing looked at Li Huacheng and gave his opinion with a smile. Li Tianlan's face was still calm, but there was impatience in his eyes. "I'm here to attend the meeting today, not to ask for your opinions. You can express your opinions, and you can also consider whether I'm qualified to continue to be the marshal. It doesn't matter." Li Tianlan put his hands on the table and looked at everyone present. "It has nothing to do with you if I go to Mount Dibbing, and it has nothing to do with whether I'm a marshal or not. I'm the palace lord of Emperor Dong's palace, and I'm using this identity to ask Wang Tianzong for an explanation." There was a sudden silence. Tang Wansen, who had been quiet for a while, suddenly stood up and screamed, "Treason! This is treason!" damn Emperor Dong's palace, execute him, this damn little bastard, I propose a vote. Enough. Li Huaqing suddenly pounded the table and stood up. He glared at Li Tianlan, then at Tang Wansen, and remained silent for a long time. Everyone was looking at him, waiting for his decision. It might be impossible to vote on whether Li Tianlan was a traitor or not. But for the moment, a vote was enough to remove Li Tianlan from his military post. Mr. President, Chen Fangqing said slowly, how about? Li Huaqing waved his hand. He took a deep breath and picked up the teacup. After a while, he said calmly, the meeting is over. After saying this, he pushed the chair away and left the conference room without looking back. The conference room was noisy for a moment and then quieted down. Chen Fangqing thought for a while, shook his head with a smile, and left. More and more people understood the reason for the meeting to be over. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. Meaning. Everyone was deep in thought. Only the parliamentarians and giants belonging to the Wang family of Beihai looked a little pale. Strictly speaking, Li Huaqing's dismissal at this time was not because he was partial to Li Tianlan. Everyone in the Prince Group and the Special Warfare Group accepted this because they were also watching. Li Tianlan was going to Mount Dibbing. What result he would get on Mount Dibbing directly determined the direction of this meeting. Li Tianlan was very strong. But he was going to Mount Dibbing. No one thought that Li Tianlan would win. Even if he would not lose, he would never win. He might even die directly on Mount Dibbing. As long as Li Tianlan died, even if he was given the rank of marshal, so what? After his death, countless people present were destined not to be soft-hearted, and the Li family would be destroyed. Even if Li Tianlan was lucky to survive, as long as the Wang family of Beihai fought back with all its strength, they could take away everything Li Tianlan had now. The rank of Marshal, Snowdance Corps, Wulan State. Nothing could be kept. Li Huaqing and the academics undoubtedly had hope for him. However, more people were now waiting to see Li Tianlan's joke, as well as the Wang family of Beihai's joke. Li Tianlan smiled. His figure twisted in the conference room, and the next second he had appeared outside the conference room. The sun was shining, the blue sky and white clouds. Autumn came down. The heat of late summer had brought the coolness of early autumn. Li Tianlan walked forward alone. Blue water, blue sky, green trees, and grass. Everything was so beautiful. On this day, at this moment, he finally carried the Li family on his shoulders. This was his Li family. The gate of the hidden dragon sea was right in front of him. Li Tianlan looked quietly in the direction of Prince Yang's mansion. Under the sun, he stretched out his palm. There was a sudden buzz in the bedroom of Prince Yang's mansion. The huge sword box that had been placed on Li Tianlan's bedside completely exploded. The dark Xinyuan sword rose into the air. The sun, moon, and stars had dimmed. But the huge dark sword was still full of unparalleled majesty. A faint and somewhat unclear feeling of elation filled the room. The huge sword shook violently. In the clear sound of breaking, the bright glass was broken into powder. The dark giant sword passed through the whole mansion in an instant. This was a sword that had consumed all the sword energy but still had a soul. It returned to nothingness in the void, tearing the space like a transparent flowing light. In the living room of the mansion, Qin Weibai stood in front of the huge French window and watched the scene in a daze. She really didn't know martial arts, so she couldn't feel the sword energy or see the transparent flowing light. But the moment the sword box was broken, the whole manor was filled with an indescribable coldness. That feeling of coldness was getting farther and farther away. Qin Weibai was silent for a while and whispered, "He has set off." "Are you sure I don't need to go?" Wei Kunlun sat on the sofa and said without looking up. "I'm not sure." Qin Weibai shook her head. "But he won't let you go. If you go, he will be angry. You only worry about whether he will be angry or not, but not about his safety." Wei Kunlun looked at Qin Weibai and asked, "This is caring." Qin Weibai was silent for a while and said calmly, "I care about his will. More than anything." Wei Kunlun looked at her for a while and suddenly laughed. "You really don't look like it." He said, "Far from it." Qin Weibai narrowed her eyes and looked at him. She ordered, "Let military counselor come to see me." Wei Kunlun looked at Qin Weibai playfully and didn't speak for a long time. Qin Weibai raised her eyebrows, and she suddenly became cold and sharp. Wei Kunlun lowered his head and picked up the teacup. He said lightly, "He is different from me. Military counselor is the real confidant of the palace master. Let him come to see you." He shook his head and said lightly, "I think you should go to see him." Qin Weibai turned her head and looked in the direction of the hidden dragon sea. That was the return path of the sword light and also the starting point. In the sunlight that no one could see, the transparent flowing light tore up all the afterglow of the old era and fell in Li Tianlan's hand with the brilliance of the new era. The giant sword was nothing. Li Tianlan looked down at his palm and the road under his feet. He had walked out of the hidden dragon sea and out of the heavily guarded alley. The busy and prosperous Yuzhou showed up in front of him little by little. Li Tianlan looked north, in the direction of the Wang family of Beihai. At this moment, under his feet, there was a journey. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 621. Dongshan Street was not considered a forbidden area in Yuzhou, but it was definitely one of the areas with the best environment, the quietest atmosphere, and the cleanest streets in the entire Yuzhou city. Sitting in an elegantly decorated restaurant, he finished the last mouthful of rice and looked at the road outside the window. After a moment of silence, he said softly, "2 more bowls of rice." Hu Yang looked at the empty bowls in front of him and was stunned for a moment. He subconsciously waved his hand and called the waiter over. In a low voice, he said, "Serve the rice." He paused and continued to emphasize, "Big bowls." The waiter nodded and looked at the table in front of Hu Yang. He stuck out his tongue. There were 6 or 7 empty bowls on the clean table. The dishes were full. Of the 8 dishes, other than the vegetable dish that could be seen to be stir-fried bamboo shoots, the other dishes were almost completely eaten. Hu Yang carefully sat down with a pot of tea. He looked at the young man who was waiting to eat and said with a smile, "Do you want to change the dishes?" Opposite Hu Yang was a young man who looked to be at most in his 20s. He had a delicate appearance and a thin figure. He wore ordinary military pants, military boots, and a white shirt. His attire was not extraordinary. However, as the owner of the restaurant, Hu Yang had lived most of his life and it was his first time seeing such a quiet young man. That kind of quiet came from his every move. Hu Yang could not describe this feeling, but he instinctively felt that the other was a bit scary. The young man nodded and did not speak. The waiter served the rice. The quiet, almost illusory young man poured some broth into the rice and ate the bamboo shoots one mouthful at a time. His table manners were not ugly. He did not wolf down the food, but the food was quickly consumed. When the new dishes were served, the 2 bowls of rice in front of the young man had already been emptied. Hu Yang drank his tea and called the waiter to continue serving the dishes. His gaze became more and more strange. He had never seen a person who could eat so much. Nearly 1.5 kilograms of rice and a table full of dishes were all devoured by him. It seemed that he was not full at all. The young man picked up a piece of braised pork and put it in his bowl. This was the restaurant's signature dish. It was fat but not greasy and was very popular. Another bowl of rice went down his stomach. The young man suddenly said, "When I was young, my life was very hard. Sometimes, the adults in my family could not even afford salt. I ate meat but it was very little. Because of the lack of salt, I could only use some other ingredients, so it tasted very bitter." Hu Yang was stunned. He smiled politely and did not know what to say. "Although it's a little bitter, it's still very delicious. Have you ever eaten rice cooked with moldy rice?" The young man thought for a moment and said, "The rice soup is black and stinky. It's disgusting. Compared to the rice here, it's like heaven and earth." Hu Yang poured a cup of tea for himself and said softly, "Now the bitterness is finally over and the sweetness is here, right?" "Not really." The young man was silent for a while. "Now, I can eat meat, and I can let the adults in my family eat meat, but people's hearts are not satisfied. I want them to live better. Do you think that's wrong?" "That's right," Hu Yang said. The young man grunted in acknowledgement and silently ate his rice for the whole night. He said lightly, "It's just that most of them are gone now." The atmosphere was somewhat stifling. Hu Yang forced a smile and said softly, "Want some wine?" The young man shook his head. "Continue serving the rice." Bowl after bowl of rice was served, and the bowls became empty. The new dishes on the table gradually decreased. The young man, who ate more than 5 kilograms of rice in one breath, finally put down his bowl and chopsticks with satisfaction and said softly, "It tastes good." Hu Yang smiled and poured a cup of tea and handed it over. The young man picked up the teacup and suddenly smiled. "What I'm most satisfied with is that there's no poison in the food. I like it very much." Hu Yang's hand suddenly froze, and his face was a little pale. "I don't know what you mean, sir." "You don't know me?" The young man said softly in a soft voice, "On this street, those who don't know me will die." There seemed to be something sharp fluctuating in the space. The hand holding the teapot was trembling slightly. Hu Yang smiled bitterly. "Greetings, Your Highness," he said softly. The young man nodded and pointed outside the window. "I also want to have a whole street in Yuzhou, and an excellent chef like you. What do you think?" "Good." "Very good," Hu Yang stammered. The young man grunted, but he didn't ask anything for no reason. He just said lightly, "Another pot of tea." Hu Yang quickly retreated and ran back quickly. He put the teapot in front of the young man and hesitated to say anything. "I didn't come here for you." The young man said slowly, "I just heard that there's a street here that completely belongs to the Wang family of Beihai, so I came to have a look. I'm not interested in your information transmission." Hu Yang wiped the sweat on his head, and his body trembled slightly. This was Dongshan Street. At the end of Dongshan Street was Dongshan Park. The street and the park were the property of the Wang family of Beihai. Every inch of land, every shop, and every person on the street belonged to the Wang family of Beihai. Sometimes, it could almost be said to be the headquarters of the Southeast Group. All the current members of the Southeast Group, as well as the old comrades who had retired from the Southeast Group, lived in Dongshan Park. As soon as the calm young man in front of him appeared here, Hu Yang had already reported the information. But until now, he didn't know what the young man was doing here. "This is a starting point," the young man said softly. "Of course, I can wait for a few people here." Hu Yang's heart sank slightly for no reason. A majestic and solemn black car with a red flag drove through the street outside the window. The young man looked at it quietly. He put down the teacup and said softly, "The tea is good." Hu Yang opened his mouth and just wanted to say something. The space in front of him seemed to be twisted, and the young man had disappeared in front of him. Tang Wanson's irritable mood gradually calmed down until he was close to his home. The meeting in the morning ended abruptly. He was undoubtedly the most unwilling one. After the meeting, he, Yi Dongxing, Wang Qinglei, and all the big shots of the Southeast Group had a deep exchange of opinions. It was not until near noon that he returned to the Tang family in Dongshan Park. "Senior Tang, there's no need to be angry. Li Tianlan's matter has put Mount Dibbing in a difficult position. Now it's a good thing. Since he dared to go up the mountain to court death, it's just a good thing. If he dies on Mount Dibbing, no one can say anything." In the back row of the spacious carriage, a middle-aged man with a scar on his face said with a sneer. He was an expert from the Wang family of Beihai. On the issue of Li Tianlan, the Southeast Group had decided to fully support Tang Wanson and let him, the old comrade, take the lead to suppress Li Tianlan. Tang Wanson agreed, so the Wang family of Beihai naturally had to give him full protection. Although the middle-aged man with the code name Ghost Face was not as good as Firmament in the Wang family of Beihai, his strength of the half-step invincible realm was enough to deal with most dangers. After all, everyone knew that even if Li Tianlan was targeted by Tang Wanson, he would not be crazy enough to take action in person. Today is just the beginning. It's better for him to die on Mount Dibbing. If the big shots on Mount Dibbing don't kill him, when he comes back, I still have ways to torture him and the so-called Li family. Tang Wanson said gloomily. He thought for a moment and suddenly said, "How's the preparation of the logistics department?" Ghostface was stunned and said lightly, The death list of the Snowdance Corps has been handed over to the political department and transmitted to the logistics department. At present, the first 1/3 of the pension has been issued. That's it. Tang Wansen waved his hand lightly and said, "There's no need to send the remaining 2/3. While Li Tianlan is going to Mount Dibbing, let's write a good article about the Snowdance Corps." Write an article? You still want pension? Bullshit. This time, we must let the whole Zhongzhou state see what happens to those who follow the Li family. The car drove into Dongshan Park. Ghostface did not speak. His body tensed up and he looked ahead with a dignified face. Tang Wansen was stunned. The car was moving forward. A large modern villa was getting closer and closer in front. The car window gradually covered the top floor of the villa. A faintly discernible figure seemed to be sitting there. Li Tianlan. Ghostface's facial muscles twitched, and he said word by word in a deep voice. Tang Wansen was stunned and then grinned. "That little bastard dares to come here? Stop the car," he said angrily. "I'd like to see what he wants to say to me." The car stopped. Ghostface and Tang Wansen got out of the car at the same time. The noon sun was still hot even in early autumn. The scorching temperature fell from the sky. On the top floor of the villa, Li Tianlan sat quietly and smoked. Seeing Tang Wansen and Ghostface get out of the car, he raised his eyebrows slightly. "How dare you come here?" Tang Wansen looked up and stared at Li Tianlan. His tone was full of rage. Li Tianlan took a drag on his cigarette and looked at Tang Wansen. His voice was gentle. "Senior Tang, you haven't answered my question yet." "What question?" Tang Wansen frowned, and his anger grew stronger. "Get out of here. Can any stray dog climb up to the roof of my Tang family?" "Li Tianlan, if you don't get out of here, I promise to make you pay a heavy price that you don't want to accept." Li Tianlan stood up with a smile and looked at Tang Wansen and Ghostface condescendingly. "It seems that you still don't understand," he said softly and took out the cigarette butt. The nervous guard was beside Tang Wansen. The face of Ghostface beside him changed dramatically. "Senior Tang, be careful." The cigarette butt fell in the air with a soothing trace. The flame flickered in the air and instantly became a raging fire all over the sky. Li Tianlan moved forward. 1 step, 2 steps. His figure walked across the roof, faster and faster. The whole villa was shaking under his feet. In the loud roar, the top floor of the villa collapsed directly. In the smoke and dust all over the sky, his figure had directly swooped down like a goshawk. The flames were burning in the rising smoke and dust. Under the sun, Ghostface roared. The dazzling lightning that was condensed to the extreme suddenly bloomed in his hands. The powerful sword intent kept rotating in the lightning and rushed toward Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan didn't even look at it. His figure directly smashed the lightning and tore the sword intent apart. He suddenly rushed forward in a whistling sound. Ghostface took Tang Wansen to hide in the villa and took out his mobile phone at the same time. "Who?" In the roar of rage, a fat middle-aged man in disheveled clothes rushed out. Looking at the raging fire outside, he was stunned for a moment and then saw Tang Wansen. "Dad, this is... Tang Ming, go back." Tang Wansen's face changed. The next second, Ghostface had already rushed into the villa with him. Every villa in Dongshan Park seemed to be far away from each other, but they were connected. Through the basement, they could leave here as soon as possible. Li Tianlan's figure rushed over. The fierce-looking Tang Ming opened his mouth and had just turned around. Puff! An extremely hard palm stabbed directly into his belly in an instant. His spine was completely torn off in an instant. His internal organs were suddenly crushed under the sword intent. Tang Ming didn't even have time to scream. Li Tianlan casually raised his hand and his body, which weighed more than 100 kilograms, directly exploded into flesh and blood all over the sky. Li Tianlan paused. Ghostface, who had taken Tang Wansen into the villa, pressed the villa's alloy door. Without any hesitation, Li Tianlan directly rushed over. The loud heartbeat kept beating between heaven and earth. Li Tianlan's figure smashed the thick alloy door in an instant and rushed into the living room. In the living room, the core figures of the Tang family stood up subconsciously. A noblewoman with a haughty expression was pointing at Li Tianlan and shouting something. But before her voice reached his ears, Li Tianlan had already removed her arm. With a shrill scream, the woman was swept away and her body was directly embedded in the wall. In the dense cracks of the wall, the people of the Tang family finally realized that disaster was coming and fled with Ghost Face Mask and Tang Wanson. Li Tianlan's body directly crashed into them. In the countless terrified screams, the body of Tang Wanson's youngest son was directly kicked into two pieces. His arms slashed out like a sword. The heads of the two noblewomen flew into the air with blood. Li Tianlan's speed was getting faster and faster. The illusory and yet real sword intent appeared and spun wildly around him. In an instant, countless pieces of blood and flesh were flying everywhere. Annihilation. Without any hesitation, Li Tianlan directly attacked. He didn't let go of the Tang family, not even a dog. Li Tianlan, how dare you? The ghost face trembled as it roared in disbelief. Li Tianlan smiled and strode forward in the face of the lightning shooting toward him. Ghost Face pushed Tang Wanson away and rushed over at the same time. The two figures collided in an instant. The clear sound of bones cracking suddenly rang out. With the splashing of blood, Li Tianlan didn't carry any sword intent around him. The violent power from his fist was transmitted to the ghost face again and again, shattering the lightning and shattering the layer of ice. Ghost Face's body floated in the air in the great power. Countless pieces of blood and broken bones were scattered in every corner of the villa. Bang! In what seemed like a long time, but also a short time, Ghost Face's body fell completely in front of Tang Wanson. Or it was no longer a body. All the blood, bones, and muscles were broken by Li Tianlan. What fell on the ground was just a piece of human skin. Tang Wanson didn't dare to look back. His old face was completely distorted. Trembling, he kept pressing the password to the door of the basement on the wall. The whole villa was extremely quiet. There were corpses and blood everywhere. Li Tianlan came over, looked at Tang Wanson, and said gently, "Senior Tang, don't you remember the password?" Tang Wanson turned to look at Li Tianlan. His body trembled violently, and he was in extreme pain and despair. In his sight were the corpses of countless relatives. This was his Tang family. All the members of the Tang family were here. Now he was the only one left in the whole Tang family. He looked at Li Tianlan and couldn't say a word. Li Tianlan directly smashed the thick and solid basement door with his fist. He smiled and said softly, "Where are you going? I'll send you." "How dare you? I know you are the former member of parliament of the empire and the deputy minister of the army ministry." Li Tianlan's smile faded little by little. "But you haven't figured out a problem." His palm fell on Tang Wanson's head, and he exerted a little force. Tang Wanson screamed at the top of his voice. The hard skull was cracking little by little, and blood flowed out of Tang Wanson's eyes, nostrils, ears, and mouth. Intense pain swept over him, bringing with it boundless darkness. Li Tianlan looked at Tang Wanson with no expression and asked the question he asked at the meeting again. "What is the overall situation?" Tang Wanson's voice trailed off and eventually became silent. Li Tianlan let go of his body and said flatly, "From today on, I am the overall situation of Zhongzhou State." Chapter 622. The raging flames continued to burn, and a large amount of smoke and dust rushed into the sky. In Dongshan Park, the luxury villa surrounded by countless flowers and trees completely collapsed. Blood-stained gravel, steel bars, and concrete blocks flew everywhere, and the harsh alarm sounded throughout the manor in an instant. The entire Dongshan Park was completely alarmed. As the most important core of the Wang family of Beihai in Yuzhou, Dongshan Park did sometimes play the role of the headquarters of the Southeast Group. The Wang family of Beihai invited all the retired leaders of the Southeast Group to live here. In addition to the environment, it naturally gave the place sufficient security. Before the completion of Dongshan Park, the Wang family of Beihai had been negotiating with Zhongzhou State. The negotiations took nearly 2 years. Under the push of the Southeast Group and many old members of parliament, Xianxia state finally agreed that the Wang family of Beihai would be responsible for the security measures of Dongshan Park. It didn't seem to be a big deal, and the Wang family of Beihai didn't go too far. It just recruited more than 5,000 security guards through its own security company to be stationed in Dongshan Park all year round. But everyone knew where the so-called 5,000 security guards came from. They were the real elites of the Beihai Corps. Today, these security guards had served in Dongshan Park for nearly 20 years. They could even be said to be the seniors of all the members of the Beihai Corps. As soon as the alarm sounded in Dongshan Park, the 5,000 elite soldiers began to arm themselves without hesitation. In different directions, in different locations, amidst the ear-piercing alarm, the 5,000 elite soldiers gathered in different corners and rushed towards the Tang family's villa at full speed. The footsteps that shook half of the park rumbled like a ferocious tiger. The roar of the collapse shook in the smoke and dust all over the sky. The Tang family of Yuzhou had completely become a thing of the past. The huge heartbeat was still beating in the ruins, as if it was shaking the whole space. Countless elites were gathering. In the fire and ruins, Li Tianlan walked out with no expression on his face. The flowers and trees around the villa gave off a burnt smell in the flames. The pool in front of the main gate cracked, and the water flowed on the ground and was completely evaporated by the flames. The flames twisted the air, and everything in sight was a little blurred. The large ruins looked extremely decayed. Li Tianlan was silent for a moment and waved his hand. The fierce wind passed by, bringing frost with it. The sudden gust of wind suppressed the flames. The thick black smoke rose for a moment and then fell down. The wind was still howling. Kacha. With Li Tianlan as the center, the world within a radius of at least 100 meters around him was violently twisted and raged with the fierce wind. In the chaotic sound, withered flowers, plants, and wilted trees were completely blown up by the wind in the blink of an eye. The sword intent was extremely illusory and fierce in the wind. Huge trunks and flowers flew high into the sky and were completely smashed by the invisible sword intent. Wood chips flew everywhere, and all traces completely dissipated in the air. Li Tianlan's surroundings suddenly became flat. The ruins were gone. The trees were gone. The flowers and grass were gone. It was completely empty. It was as if the once illustrious Tang clan had never existed in the first place. There was no trace of them. Li Tianlan looked up at the sky. There was a faint buzzing sound in the sky. The invisible drone flew over the flat land at a controlled speed, and the camera recorded everything Li Tianlan did. Li Tianlan quietly looked at the drone in the air. After a moment of silence, he finally did nothing. His gaze passed through this piece of flat land and looked at the villas not far away. Suddenly he laughed. At this moment, countless pairs of eyes in Dongshan Park were quietly watching Li Tianlan. As his eyes swept over, countless pairs of eyes looked away. In the villa closest to the Tang clan, an old man with gray hair rubbed the two chess pieces in his hands. He stood in front of the window like a statue, and his body was extremely stiff. Beside the old man stood the eldest son who came from Jianghuai for the meeting in Yuzhou. At this time, they looked at each other and saw fear in each other's eyes as they looked at Li Tianlan standing in the sun. Old Tang has been very active these days. Deep, this chapter is not over. Please turn the page. In the dull atmosphere, the middle-aged man who looked very young glanced at his father and said in a low voice, "Isn't that right?" The old man sighed and touched his white hair. There is no successor in the Tang clan. After Qin Qinghuan was killed by Li Tianlan, old Tang was a little desperate. The Tang family must have gotten Wang Qinglei's promise. That's why they're doing this. He put all his hopes on the meeting. Today, he thought it was a great achievement. Everyone in the Tang clan, young and old, came here to celebrate for old Tang. You see, one person, one sword, one fire, directly wiped out the entire Tang clan. The old man looked at Li Tianlan who was standing not far away. Feeling the other party's eyes sweeping over, he subconsciously avoided it and sighed. He is a very good normal person. Why did he compete with a madman? Isn't he courting death? The middle-aged man, who was already a border governor of Zhongzhou state, lowered his head beside the old man and said nothing. Countless footsteps rushed up and down in Dongshan Park like a raging tide, rushing over at a very fast speed. The old man's face changed. The middle-aged man's face also changed. Call Dongxing. He must come out on this matter. Hurry up. The old man said quickly and continued, in addition, call Wang Qinglei and ask him to come here immediately. Tang Wansen stood up for him. Now that something has happened, no one can hide. The middle-aged man frowned and said with a wry smile, Dad, why do we need to call for such a big thing? I'm afraid we know what we should know now. He looked at Li Tianlan, who was still standing there and looking at the drone. The sun shone on him, elongating his shadow. He stood there quietly, calm, indifferent, fearless, and full of fighting spirit. What an idiot! The middle-aged man's mouth twitched. I really don't know how to end this matter. The old man glanced at him. This is not a problem for you to worry about. He pointed at Li Tianlan. I guess he is the only one who hasn't figured out how to end it. What are you worried about? The middle-aged man took a deep look at his father and suddenly asked, Then what are you worried about? Anyway, I'm not worried about Li Tianlan. The old man shook his head. Listening to the roar of approaching footsteps, the corners of his mouth kept twitching. These idiots. Now this guy is crazy enough to kill Tang Wansen, but he doesn't dare to kill these 5,000 people? Stupid, ask them to stop. The middle-aged man didn't move. No one moved in the entire Winter Mountain Park except for these 5,000 people. In the silence, only the crazy rushing footsteps became clearer and clearer. These 5,000 people had been wearing the hat of security guards for nearly 20 years. But they were soldiers. From Beihai to Yuzhou, this park was the territory they swore to defend. It was their belief. They could not stop no matter what they faced. The middle-aged man glanced at Li Tianlan. He was still standing there, calm and collected, unhurried. That calmness exuded from his every move, with ferocious bloodthirst and hysterical madness. Everyone was like that. As long as he was mentally prepared to face the consequences, he could do anything. The first batch of elites of the Beihai Corps rushed out of the woods and onto the flat ground. They were densely packed. In the thunderous footsteps, a ferocious and furious roar suddenly rang out, Kill! There was no hesitation, no wait and see. They were soldiers, not negotiation experts. In the face of the assailant, that was all they could do. Kill. More and more figures rushed toward Li Tianlan. Slowly, Li Tianlan turned around. He raised his eyebrows. The elites of the Beihai Corps rushed up without hesitation, leaving no room for negotiation. Strong, unyielding, and indomitable, Li Tianlan stretched out his hand. In everyone's sight, his palm touched his back. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. The empty nothingness was clenched in his hand. There was no hesitation, no retreat, and no probing. Li Tianlan's palm swung out almost impudently and casually. Carelessly. However, the bright and beautiful sunlight in the sky suddenly darkened for a moment. Day and night alternated. A dark and majestic giant sword appeared in Li Tianlan's hand. The sun, the moon, and the stars were rotating. Mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas were roaring. Shattering style. A sword light as long as 100 meters appeared in front of everyone at the moment when the day and night alternated. This sword light was so abrupt, like an illusion, but the crisis of death was so clear. Puff! There was a dull sound as if heaven and earth were completely cut apart. Countless blood instantly dyed a large area of the flat ground and woods red. The sword light that was condensed to the extreme was so crazy and resolute. It cut the crowd of the Wang family of Beihai into pieces without any mercy. Countless blood and broken bodies shot out wildly. Countless roars and roars suddenly quieted down. Li Tianlan laughed. His voice echoed in this world, cold and gentle. Go on. There was dead silence in Winter Mountain Park. Li Tianlan. Even the elites of the Beihai Corps stagnated in the scene like Azura's purgatory. They were not afraid of blood. But who could have thought that there would be such a day when there was no war in Zhongzhou State? At the front of the crowd, A burly middle-aged man suddenly roared with great shock and anger. You slaughtered Elder Tang's family and killed people here. What do you think Zhongzhou State is? What do you think Winter Mountain Park is? Are you going to commit treason? Li Tianlan glanced at him casually. Who are you? Wang Yue, commander of the 3rd Reconnaissance Division of the Beihai Corps. The middle-aged man strode out of the crowd. I'm also the highest officer here. Am I qualified to talk to you? Oh. Li Tianlan said, today, I killed the dog of the Wang family of Beihai. This is a personal grudge between me and Wang Tianzong. Don't talk about the country and treason so easily. You're not young anymore. Why are you so childish? Wang Yue's face was purple and red, looking extremely ferocious. Li Tianlan laughed. Even if what I did was a little inappropriate, there are so many big shots in the Wang family of Beihai. Everyone is focused on the overall situation. You won't argue with me, right? You have to take the overall situation into consideration. Wang Yue's eyes darkened. The words, take the overall situation into consideration, stabbed his heart like a knife, making it hard for him to breathe. For a moment, his ears were filled with the words, take the overall situation into consideration. On the other side, Li Tianlan chuckled and raised the sword in his hand again without any hesitation. You? Wang Yue took a deep breath. Do you think there is no one in the Wang family of Beihai? No. Li Tianlan said blandly, I don't know if there is anyone in the Wang family of Beihai, but now there is no one in the Li family, my Li family. If there was someone in the Li family, who could be used, how could he stand here alone? The sword edge slowly fell. The huge sword light covered the scorching sun, and his voice came at the same time. My Dibbing Mountain just wants to see who else the Wang family of Beihai has without Wang Tianzong. Let's start from here. The sharp sword light crossed the sky and the earth. Wang Yue's figure was directly torn apart by the sword light. Countless elites of the Beihai Corps were also completely torn apart by the sword light. In the silence, Li Tianlan looked in the direction of the Wang family of Beihai. From here to Beihai, it was a long road of thousands of miles. It was his personal expedition. Li Tianlan clenched Xianyuan's sword and whispered, I'm coming. Crack. In the slight cracking sound, the huge and majestic Xianyuan's sword suddenly shattered in the sunlight. It broke into countless pieces. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 623. The speeding vehicle abruptly stopped on the spot. The black Audi had driven into Dongshan Street. Wang Qinglei sat in the back of the car, looking at the message on his phone, and a cruel coldness flashed through his eyes. He didn't seem to know how to react. He looked down at his phone and remained silent for a long time. Secretary. The driver in the front seat glanced at him through the rearview mirror and hesitated. Wang Qinglei moved his body, raised his head slowly, and looked at the driver with a blank expression. Secretary. The driver's face changed. Phew. Wang Qinglei exhaled heavily, shook his head slowly and said hoarsely, I'm fine. He looked at Dongshan Street. Dongshan Street was long, wide, and clean. From this position he couldn't see the lush Dongshan Park, nor could he hear the fighting over there. The fighting was over. In other words, the slaughter was over. He came a step late. What should happen had happened. He looked down at his phone again. The content on the phone screen was like a wildfire, burning all his reason. Li Tianlan had left Dongshan Park. It took less than 10 minutes. The Tang family, a wealthy family in Yuzhou, was completely wiped out, and no one survived. Wang Yue of the Beihai Corps was killed with a sword. Countless 5,000 elites of the Beihai Corps were killed. There was no delay in the whole process. It was clean and tidy. Facing 5,000 elites of the Beihai Corps, Li Tianlan directly killed them without any disguise. Now the video of the whole process had been sent to all the high-level officials in Yuzhou. Wang Qinglei also received the video, but he didn't watch it. Just from this message alone, he could clearly smell the bloody and tyrannical scent. From today's meeting, he didn't see the slightest hesitation in Li Tianlan's every move. What he felt was only madness. The kind of complete madness that drove himself to a dead end, with no room for compromise and retreat. Li Tianlan had left Dongshan Park. The scene was already in chaos. Wang Qinglei rubbed his forehead. After a long time, he said hoarsely, "Go back." Bang, bang, bang. When there was a hasty knock on the door, Prime Minister Chen Fangqing of Zhongzhou State had just sat down opposite Li Huaqing. As the current leader of the Prince Group, he came today to communicate with Li Huaqing about Li Tianlan. However, just as the topic began, before Chen Fangqing could finish his words, such as arrogant, despotic, and condescending, there was a knock on the door. Li Huaqing looked at Chen Fangqing in surprise, then raised his eyebrows and said, "Come in." Li Huaqing, the secretary, rushed in with a complicated look on her face. It could even be said that she barged in. Chen Fangqing smiled and lowered his head to drink his tea. The secretary's name was Su Zian, a rising star of the academics, Li Huaqing's confidant, and the well-deserved first secretary of Zhongzhou State. It was said that Li Huaqing had released him. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. The Prince Group also paid a lot of attention to Su Zian, but now the character of the first secretary, Chen Fangqing, sipped his tea and smiled without saying a word. President Tang Wanson was killed by Li Tianlan. Simple, direct, clear, and without any superfluous words, Su Zian explained everything clearly in one sentence. Pooh! Li Huaqing was stunned for a moment. Chen Fangqing spat out the tea that he had just drunk. "What did you say?" Chen Fangqing asked directly before Li Huaqing could. His Highness Li Tianlan went directly to Dongshan Park after the meeting. A few minutes ago, Mr. Tang had just returned home, and Li Tianlan directly killed more than 20 people of the Tang family, including Mr. Tang himself. Su Zian glanced at Chen Fangqing, took a deep breath, and repeated the news that shocked him so much that he couldn't recover from his shock. "Are you sure it was Li Tianlan who did it?" Chen Fangqing's eyes flickered. "There is a video of the scene, and it's complete." Su Zian said quickly, "I've asked someone to get the video." In addition, not only the Tang family, but also the 5,000 elites of Beihai stationed in Dongshan Park suffered heavy casualties. Wang Yue was killed with a sword. At present, Dongshan Park is in chaos. Minister Ji and General Yi rushed there as soon as they got the news. "How dare he?" Chen Fangqing was furious. "What is he doing? What does Li Tianlan want to do? Is he crazy? Mr. Tang is a former member of Zhongzhou State. He killed Mr. Tang, which is treason." He looked at Su Zian. "Where is Li Tianlan now?" "He's on the way to the Wang family of Beihai. He didn't hide his whereabouts. Look at the route." Su Zian's face was a little pale. Everyone could see Li Tianlan's route, but that route was too crazy. Or, it was their speculation after seeing the route that was too crazy. "Say it, don't hesitate." Li Huaqing's voice was still calm. In a short time, he seemed to have adjusted his mood. "His Highness Li Tianlan's route seems to be to Qin Island." Su Zian said reluctantly. Li Huaqing's face changed. Chen Fangqing narrowed his eyes. From Yuzhou, if one didn't go to Beihai by plane, the shortest route was to go to Liaodong. From Liaodong, he entered Beihai province by boat and landed at the edge of Shenzhou City, the capital of Beihai province. To Qin Island was located in Dongshan, and it would only get farther and farther from Mount Dibing. What do you think? Li Huaqing suddenly glanced at Chen Fangqing. "He's completely crazy." Chen Fangqing said without hesitation, "Extremely arrogant." Li Huaqing didn't speak. Li Tianlan didn't hide his whereabouts. His purpose was too obvious. From Qin Island, Li Tianlan would eventually land in the southernmost part of Beihai province. And Mount Dibing was in the northernmost part of Beihai. Such a route could only indicate one fact. He set off from the southernmost part of Beihai because he wanted to go through the whole Beihai by himself. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. Province. 500 years in the Dark World. Since the establishment of the Wang family of Beihai, no one would be so crazy. He wanted to go through the whole Beihai by himself. "It's crazy," Li Huaqing said softly. His voice was very light, but thinking of Li Tianlan's actions at this time, Even with his status and age, he still felt a little excited. He has lost his mind, Chen Fangqing said quietly. Li Huaqing laughed. He said slowly, what if he succeeds? Chen Fangqing was stunned, and his face gradually changed. What if Li Tianlan succeeds? Alone, he landed in the southernmost part of Beihai province, swept through the whole province, climbed Mount Dibing, and stepped on the stage of formidable person. This was a feat that had not been done for hundreds of years. If he succeeded and returned to Zhongzhou State, how should Zhongzhou State treat him? Convict him? Because he killed Tang Wansen, the former senator? Li Tianlan was not Li Honghe. He did not have Li Honghe's cultivation and absolute loyalty to Zhongzhou State. He insisted that everything he did was a personal grudge against the Wang family of Beihai. The high-level officials of Zhongzhou State could only think so. Maybe there could be different opinions. But once this matter was brought to the level of the overall situation, no one believed that Li Tianlan would not resist, not even Chen Fangqing. Li Tianlan was completely a madman now. He did not care about the overall situation. Whoever dared to fight against him, he dared to kill. If Zhongzhou State insisted that he committed treason, then so be it. Now, it was no longer about what Li Tianlan would do. It was about how the high-level officials of Zhongzhou State would deal with it. If Li Tianlan came back alive, a heavenly son who could go through the whole Beihai province, a heavenly son who had the full support of the giant group, a heavenly son who had high hopes from the academics, a heavenly son who had been recognized by Mount Shu, Sai City, and even Jade Pool, a heavenly son who had taken back all of Jiangxia, a heavenly son who connected the whole Lin clan. Who could accuse such a person of treason? It might be possible to say so, but who dared to say so? Such a Li Tianlan really did not need to care about the overall situation. Just like Wang Tianzong in Zhongzhou State before. He was the overall situation in Zhongzhou State. Chen Fangqing's face was a little livid as he imagined that scene. The new era had obviously shrouded them. That was the era of Li Tianlan. It was his own prosperity. He will die on the way, Chen Fangqing said slowly. Li Huaqing smiled and said lightly, wait for the result, Prime Minister. Where were we just now? Go on. His tone was gentle and friendly, but in Chen Fangqing's ears, it was with a kind of faint mockery. Chen Fangqing paused slightly, shook his head, and said, forget it, it's all right. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 624. The early autumn wind swept into the luxurious and exquisite hall with the rich fragrance of flowers, and the air conditioner blew outward. The temperature was soft and comfortable, and the atmosphere was relaxed and lazy. When Deep Dream walked into the hall of Prince Yong's mansion, Wei Kunlun was sitting on the sofa and drinking tea. The fragrance of tea and flowers mixed together. He sat there quietly, fiddling with the tea set in front of him, with a face full of enjoyment. Qin Weibai stood at the window and looked at the scenery outside. The warm light sprinkled on her cold, delicate, almost flawless face, glowing with sacred brilliance. Deep Dream suddenly felt a little awe. To Saint, to Wei Kunlun, to Mount Shu, and to Qin Weibai. The chaos in Eastern Europe was completely over. The Samsara Palace was also completely destroyed. Strictly speaking, this organization could not be regarded as a superpower from the beginning to the end. There was no doubt that it had been standing at the forefront of the Dark World in recent years. The destruction of the Samsara Palace did not win anyone's respect, but it got everyone's fear and scruples. The final battle of Heaven Capital, the 3-year war in the Dark World, and the chaos in Eastern Europe. The day of death, the day of judgment, and the day of termination. Until the eternal sword. When everything happened, people didn't feel anything special. But when everything officially ended, people suddenly looked back and found that all of this was vaguely closely related. People didn't know when the Samsara Palace began to promote all this, but there was no doubt that when the almost eternal sword fell, the whole era, the era of the Wang family of Beihai, had officially ended at that time. All the situations from the beginning to the end. To Qin Weibai. There was no doubt that she played a vital role in it. Even if the Samsara Palace had been destroyed, these two people, perhaps with the help of military counselor, still had awe-inspiring power. Deep Dream's heart, which had been beating wildly all the way, suddenly calmed down at this moment. She became quiet, just like when she stood next to Situ Tangyue, the governor. She stood in the living room, bowed respectfully and whispered, "Greetings, your highnesses." Qin Weibai turned to look at Deep Dream, nodded and asked, "How is the governor's injury?" "It's not very optimistic. It takes a long time to recover." Deep Dream didn't hide anything. "Sit down." Wei Kunlun suddenly waved his hand and said with a smile, "Governor and I are old friends. When things in Yuzhou are over, I'll go with you to Mount Taibai to visit her." "Thank you, Your Highness." Deep Dream nodded. Sai City was undoubtedly a force that had paid a heavy price in Eastern Europe. They didn't have many people. Strictly speaking, they only sent 4 people in Eastern Europe. Now Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud had returned to Zhongzhou State with minor injuries, but Situ Tangyue, the city governor, and Situ Wanjie, the deputy city governor of Fu State, were both seriously injured. Wanjie's foundation was completely destroyed, and he was still in a coma. There was no hope for him to recover. Situ Tangyue also needed a long time to recover. Sai City was close to Snow Country. If Snow Country really bowed to the Wang family of Beihai as rumored, Snow Country would become a knife of Beihai. One could imagine the pressure on Sai City in the future. At this time, if Wei Kunlun and Mount Shu expressed their goodwill, even if the Wang family of Beihai would not be afraid of them, at least Snow Country would hesitate to act in the future. As Wei Kunlun entered the Invincible Realm, his status in the Dark World had changed dramatically. "You don't have to call me Your Highness from now on." Wei Kunlun's voice was gentle. "I am now the Deputy Lord of Emperor Dong's palace. Mount Shu will be a part of Emperor Dong's palace from now on." Deep Dream's eyes widened in shock. Now the whole Zhongzhou state knew that Wei Kunlun was a saint and that Mount Shu was going to join Emperor Dong's palace. But no one had expected it to be so fast. In just one night the matter was settled? Prince Group. Deep Dream wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Wei Kunlun's eldest brother was one of the leaders of Prince Group. Therefore, Mount Shu had always been regarded as a part of Prince Group, and Prince Group also had a lot of support for Mount Shu. When the Special Warfare Headquarters was established, Wei Kunlun was recommended and finally decided to be the minister of the Southwest Special Warfare Headquarters. If the whole Mount Shu joined Emperor Dong's palace, Prince Group would go completely crazy, wouldn't it? "So I have to wait for the right time to announce it." Wei Kunlun said slowly, "This time Your Highness went to Beihai and waited for him to come back. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page." The right time. Deep Dream's face changed. This was undoubtedly the most important thing, and it was also the reason why she came here in a hurry. Your Highnesses, young governor went directly to Winter Mountain Park after the meeting. Now the Tang family of Yuzhou has been destroyed by young governor in Winter Mountain Park. This matter, she thought about it and didn't know what to say for a moment. Killing the former counselor of the Southeast Group in Dongshan Park. Such a loud slap in the face was destined to get crazy revenge from the Wang family of Beihai. This is just the beginning. It's like a signal for the beginning of a big play. Wei Kunlun said softly, "A few days later, when Your Highness ascends the stage of formidable person, what can the Wang family of Beihai do?" Ascending the stage of formidable person. Hearing this news again, Deep Dream's brain was still a little dizzy. Every time she heard such things, she felt crazy. "But young governor only has himself," she said reluctantly. "Will you also?" "I won't go." Wei Kunlun smiled. "I wanted to go, but His Highness refused. I wanted to follow him, but he refused again." He looked at Qin Weibai's slim and exquisite back, with a trace of alienation in his eyes. He said lightly, "Since this man doesn't care about her, what's the use of me caring about him?" Deep Dream was stunned. "His will is above everything to me." Qin Weibai, who had been silent, turned around and looked at Wei Kunlun. "I really don't have to worry about anything. He's my man. This time he goes to Beihai, he is destined to fight his way through the entire Beihai province and stand in a place where the whole Dark World can see him. Ha! Wei Kunlun's laughter was mocking. He looked at Qin Weibai with a playful look in his eyes. Your man? Enough, Qin Weibai said abruptly. Her cold eyes became extremely cold in an instant, and there was clear anger in them. How dare you question my identity? If he isn't my man, whose is he? Tell me, whose is he? Her voice was very high, but it was not sharp. It was clear and pleasant to listen to, but it carried an irresistible majesty. Deep Dream's palm shook slightly. Wei Kunlun lowered his head and drank his tea, saying nothing. You don't deserve to question my identity. Not even military counselor. Qin Weibai's voice was cold. You can disagree, but the palace master has fallen. I can't restrain you. If you have an idea, do it. If you don't want to stay in Emperor Dong's palace, get out of here. Her chest rose and fell slightly. The invisible pressure that had been accumulating for many days finally broke out in Wei Kunlun's words. I'm staying here, not because of you. Wei Kunlun was silent for a long time. Neither is military counselor. I know. Qin Weibai said blandly, military counselor is doing it for the palace master, and you are doing it for Tianlun. But it doesn't mean anything. Do you love him? Wei Kunlun suddenly asked an inexplicable question. Qin Weibai's body stiffened for a moment. He turned around slightly and narrowed his eyes. Everyone could see that this was a sign that her anger was about to explode. Military counselor looked straight into those majestic, beautiful, bright, and deep eyes. What do you think? Qin Weibai asked word by word. Wei Kunlun lowered his head and was silent for a long time. I'm willing to apologize. I'm sorry. After a long time, he slowly said with difficulty, Boss. Qin Weibai slowly turned around and looked out of the window. Her eyes were far away, falling on the north, on Beihai. She thought of Li Tianlun. After a long journey of thousands of miles, how magnificent would he be when he finally stood on the stage of formidable person? Qin Weibai thought about it quietly. She was lost in her thoughts. Boss, are you really not worried? Wei Kunlun whispered. He was a new invincible realm expert in Zhongzhou State. Although his realm had not been stable, no one could stop him if he wanted to leave with the Nirvana sword in his hand. Qin Weibai really didn't know martial arts. However, if he went out at this time, a series of unknown consequences in the future would be hard for him to bear. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. That was why he was so obvious about his feelings toward Qin Weibai. There's nothing to worry about. Qin Weibai said. That's the Wang family of Beihai. Wei Kunlun smiled bitterly. They have been passed down for hundreds of years and have a deep foundation. Who knows how many trump cards they have? The Wang family of Beihai is also shameless. Qin Weibai said softly, Tianlun goes there alone. What's the use of having a strong foundation? The Wang family of Beihai has countless troops, countless cutting-edge weapons, and even nuclear weapons. Will they be used on Tianlun? Even if they don't use these, so many experts are not just for show. His Highness can't withstand the attrition warfare. Wei Kunlun said calmly. Tianlun and Xianyuan Feng can be together. One person and one sword. It's okay, Qin Weibai said quietly. Xianyuan Feng. Wei Kunlun shook his head. I know this sword. Strictly speaking, this sword is actually a murderous weapon. Countless energy and sword intent have been accumulated for countless years. That's why the palace master's sword ended Wang Tianzong. How powerful was Wang Tianzong at that time? It's not an exaggeration to say that he was truly invincible in the world. The palace master barely activated Xianyuan Feng with the help of many half-step invincible realm experts and fire-flaming realm experts. But all the energy has been exhausted in that sword. How can Xianyuan Feng have sword intent now? This is the greatest divine weapon in hundreds of years. Is it useless without sword intent? Qin Weibai turned around and walked over, sitting opposite Wei Kunlun. Deep Dream couldn't help but sniff. The natural body fragrance, the fragrance of flowers outside the window, and the fragrance of tea in front of her blended together, making people feel relaxed and happy. Qin Weibai took a sip of tea and said softly, As long as Tianlong can find out Xin Yuanfeng's real secret, he doesn't have to worry about his trip to Beihai. Xin Yuanfeng's real secret? Wei Kunlun frowned more and more. It's the 13th floor. Qin Weibai said quietly, it's the core of a heavenly son's lifelong martial arts. Tianlong's current martial arts has encountered a great problem, that is, being too perfect makes it imperfect. But someone has encountered such a problem. The key to how Tianlong can enter the invincible realm lies in Shen Yuanfeng. Wei Kunlun's eyes became extremely calm. What if His Highness can't find it? He asked. Don't worry. Qin Weibai smiled. With the temper of that sword, even if Tianlong ignores it, it will show off when it returns to Tianlong. What is the secret? Wei Kunlun asked. Qin Weibai thought for a moment. You got that notebook? She said slowly. Do you remember the few short sentences on the last page? Wei Kunlun froze for a moment. He had drifted in the lake in Lin, and for many days before he entered the invincible realm. He remembered every sentence on the notebook clearly. He had read the few short sentences on the last page countless times, but he was still confused about the meaning. The so-called confusion was an understanding, but not a complete understanding. And if that notebook could be said to be the notes of the heavenly son, the few short sentences on the last page were obviously not written by the heavenly son. It was more like someone added them later, or it was a summary of his short but brilliant life. But there was no mention of Shen Yuanfeng in those short sentences. And there was no mention of the 13th floor. What does that mean? Saint asked. That's what it means. Qin Weibai's voice was very light. Saint thought about those short sentences and was a little lost in thought. The silver moonlight moved Beihai. The stunning blue light shone on Zhongzhou State. The twilight of the horizon calmed the war. The void judgment shook the world. The shadow divine weapon was like the sun and the moon. The Eastern Emperor broke his heart and beauty. The troubled world stopped before Xinyuan. He still didn't quite understand what it meant. Everything in that notebook was like a legend to him. He silently read the 7 lines of short sentences and said softly, Are these sentences true? Qin Weibai glanced at him and said softly, This is the life of that person. Of course it's true. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 625. No one went after Li Tianlong, and no one dared to chase after him. In less than a few hours after the Tang family was destroyed, many high-level officials of Zhongzhou State showed enough anger on different occasions, especially several leaders of the Wang family of Beihai who rushed to Dongshan Park. Their anger was more obvious. But no matter what happened to Li Tianlong, at least the Tang family was really destroyed. The young marshal who came back after the chaos in Eastern Europe had shown enough madness. At this time, no one wanted to stop him. But when Li Tianlong entered Qingdao and boarded the ship, a special plane from Yuzhou had landed directly in Lin. The low-key and shabby motorcade set off from the airport and arrived at Lonely Mountain as soon as possible. Fan Tianyin, the general of the Southeast Group and the Minister of Security of Zhongzhou State, led the team in person. 2 deputy ministers from Kunlun City and the Prince Group accompanied him. Secretaries, guards, and staff, nearly 20 people were crowded in several cars, which made people angry. It's too much. He-sung, didn't know how many times he had repeated this sentence. Born in the Prince Group, he used to be the secretary of a member of parliament in Zhongzhou State. He had a very high starting point. He even forgot how long it had been since he had been treated like this. Before leaving Yuzhou, the Ministry of Security had communicated with Jiangxia. Not to mention Fan Tianyin, the minister, even if there was only a deputy minister leading the team, Jiangxia should put out a big welcome. Even if the number 1 or 2 figures of Jiangxia did not show up, it was always appropriate to send a secretary general to pick them up. But what about the actual situation? When Fan Tianyin led 2 deputy ministers to Jiangxia, the so-called welcome ceremony given by Jiangxia was only a police car. The airport police station only sent 2 police officers. Not to mention the secretary general, even the director of the police station did not come. When several police officers rushed into the pickup gate nervously, they were even regarded as wanted criminals who had exposed their whereabouts. Thinking of that funny scene and looking at the police car walking slowly in front of him, He Sung-hu was so angry that his arms were trembling. They are so uncooperative. Has Xianxia really become the independent kingdom of the Li family? The remaining forces of the Li family were all concentrated in Xianxia, which was protected by Wu Jingmin. Now Wu Jingmin went to the cabinet, while Zhou Yuanshan came from Zhongyuan. In terms of confidence, Zhou Yuanshan, who has the support of the giant group, is undoubtedly much stronger than Wu Jingmin. Tan Li, who was beside He Sung-hu, said calmly. Tan Li was the last deputy minister of the Ministry of Security, but in fact, it was just a title. He seldom appeared in the Ministry of Security. Most of the time, he was assisting Gu Xingyun to deal with some affairs of Kunlun City and the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. In terms of responsibility, he could be regarded as Gu Xingyun's secretary with great power. Overbearing? Not to mention Zhou Yuanshan, the entire giant group is under the leadership of Zhongzhou State. Today, look at their arrogance. Good Lord, they really don't care about stopping me. When I go back, I must report what I saw and heard this time. He Sung-hu sneered, the corners of his mouth twitching. I wonder if Su. He suddenly paused mid-sentence, glanced at Fan Tianyin, and didn't continue. In the back row of a car, Fan Tianyin was squeezed in the most uncomfortable position, but he remained calm and collected. Hearing He Sung-hu's half-sentence, he shook his head. Xianxia was indeed the world of the Li family. But now the leader of Xianxia was the general of the Southeast Group and Fan Tianyin's personal friend, Su Xinghe. When he set off from Yuzhou, the first phone call he made was to Su Xinghe. Su Xinghe said with a smile that he would make arrangements, and then when they arrived in Lin, they would face the treatment at this time. This was not only contempt, but also a naked demonstration. He Sung-hu was angry, but Su Xinghe, who got the news at this time, would probably be even more angry and aggrieved. If you have any complaints, go back and talk about it. Fan Tianyin took a deep breath, looked at the mountain road that was getting closer and closer, and said calmly, remember our task this time. The shabby police car leading the way in front suddenly stopped. Two policemen hurriedly jumped out of the police car and saluted. A man who was less than middle-aged but extremely calm stood there, smiling like a spring breeze. In front of them was the path into Lonely Mountain. The man at the intersection stood there and didn't know how long he had been waiting. Fan Tianyin narrowed his eyes, took a deep breath, and said in a deep voice, get off. What if we don't go down? It's better to wait for him to come over. He Sung-hu was still resentful. Don't get off? Will anyone care about you if you don't get off? Fan Tianyin couldn't help but sneer. The man in his sight didn't look at this side at all, but just talked to the two policemen. He Sung-hu opened the door resentfully. Fan Tianyin walked out. The man over there was still talking, looking at the two policemen, and seemed to be chatting. The humiliation came up little by little, with anger. Fan Tianyin clenched his fists tightly, forced a smile, walked quickly, and took the initiative to reach out his hand. Governor Zhou, hello. I didn't expect to see you here. What a coincidence, huh? Governor Zhou, who had stood here alone for a long time, didn't know. This chapter is not over, please turn the page. Governor Zhou Yunshan's eyes were clear and gentle, and his body was motionless. When Fan Tianyin came in front of him, he reached out his hand and shook hands with him. He said with a smile, Minister, you are wrong. It's not a coincidence at all. I deliberately waited for you here. Fan Tianyin narrowed his eyes, and his smile faded little by little. I've just met Senior Li. Zhou Yunshan's voice was very calm, but this calmness had the calmness of a governor, which gave people a lot of pressure. Senior Li has already known why you are here, and he asked me to tell you a message. If you have anything to say, wait until Tianlong comes back from Beihai. He paused and said, That's it, Minister Fan, please go back. That's it? He Sung-hu's voice suddenly became sharp. Governor Zhou, we came all the way from Yuzhou. Can we be sent away so easily? What do you think we are? What do you think the Ministry of Security is? Fan Tianyin seemed to want to look back at He Sung-hu, but he held back and just called him an idiot in his heart. Zhou Yuanshan glanced at him and laughed. Comrade, do you think it's easy to let you go back? He Sung-hu opened his mouth, but didn't speak and became more and more angry. This comrade. Listen to this address. Just a few months ago, Zhou Yuanshan was at the same level as He Sung-hu, and they met a lot in meetings and small meetings. After a few months, they became this comrade. Senior Li didn't perfunctory you. These are his original words. Zhou Yuanshan said calmly. Fan Tianyin smiled bitterly. He didn't think that Li Honghe would easily send them back. Only an idiot would think that it was easy for the dignified governor of Jiangxia to stay here and stand guard with such an arm. But how could they go back now that they had come here? Governor Zhou, what Marshal Tianlan did in Yuzhou is suspected of treason. Shouldn't Senior Li give us an explanation? Fan Tianyin's tone was low. Suspected of treason? Zhou Yuanshan stared into his eyes. Who said that? Did you say it yourself, or did a counselor or director say it? It doesn't matter. What matters is, answer my question. Zhou Yuanshan interrupted Fan Tianyin. I just want to know who said that Tianlan is suspected of treason? Fan Tianyin's eyes turned cold and he said coldly, does it make any difference who said it? Of course it makes a difference. Zhou Yuanshan's tone was cold. If it was a counselor or director who said it, I can call him now and ask him if this is the overall meaning of the high-level officials of Zhongzhou State. If the answer is yes, I will immediately let him go to the provincial government and turn a blind eye to this matter. But the youngest marshal of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State is suspected of treason. If such a thing is said by a minister himself, I think Marshal Li will also ask you for an explanation when he comes back. All the marshals in the military should ask you for an explanation. He waved his hand and sneered. When can a minister slander the marshal of Zhongzhou State? Just a minister. Fan Tianyin had been in the Ministry of Security for so many years, but it was the first time he had heard such a sentence. You, he reached out and pointed at Zhou Yuanshan fiercely. Zhou Yuanshan looked at him calmly and said slowly, tell me, which counselor said that Tianlan is suspected of treason? Fan Tianyin couldn't answer such a question. Killing the former counselor of Zhongzhou State and slaughtering the elites of Beihai Corps, any of which could be labeled as treason. But it was Li Tianlan who did it. Before Li Tianlan came back, even the council giants would not easily say that Li Tianlan was a traitor. This was the so-called leeway. Most of the battles would not really be life or death. Even in the worst situation, the two sides would leave room for compromise. If this is really said by a minister, then let's not talk about it, okay? Zhou Yuanshan said slowly, Minister Fan, please go back. Senior Li also means the same. If you have anything to say, what explanation do you want? When Tianlan comes back, let him give it to you. He nodded. He still didn't look at the two deputy ministers and said flatly, that's all I have to say. If you want to break in, I can't stop you because I don't know martial arts. But no matter how down and out the Li family is, not everyone can offend it, right? He turned and walked into the police car, patted a policeman on the shoulder, and said slowly, drive. The police car was bathed in the light of dusk and drove to the mountain road. Fan Tianyin stood there quietly and kept silent for a long time. It's outrageous, outrageous, enough. Fan Tianyin interrupted He Sung-hu's roar. He glanced at He Sung-hu and asked, do you want to go up? He Sung-hu's voice suddenly stopped. Of course he wanted to go up, but, Fan Tianyin asked again, do you dare to go up? He Sung-hu was a little angry. He snorted coldly and didn't speak. No matter how down and out the Li family was, he was not a deputy minister who dared to break in. Fan Tianyin glanced at the police car quietly going up the mountain and took a deep breath. How arrogant and domineering. This chapter is not over, please turn the page. He slowly turned around and said calmly, since no one wants to go up, then go back. Go back where? He Sung-hu asked blankly. Go back where? Fan Tianyin seemed to be angry and laughed. Go back to Yuzhou. If deputy minister he has the face to go back, you can go to work in the Ministry of Security building tomorrow. Go back where? You tell me where to go. Find a hotel nearby and stay. Wait for Li Tianlan to come back and continue to investigate. The police car was moving forward. The motorcade was retreating. Until the motorcade disappeared from his sight, Zhou Yuanshan withdrew his gaze from the rearview mirror and said calmly, "Drive faster." The policeman who drove for the governor for the first time nodded excitedly and went straight up the mountain road. The construction on Lonely Mountain had come to an end. The sign of the supervisory council was also set up. Zhou Yuanshan didn't thank them until he reached a place where the vehicles couldn't pass. Then he got out of the car and continued to walk to the top of the mountain. His pace was still calm, but it was much faster than usual. In fact, Fan Tianyin was wrong. It was true that Zhou Yuanshan deliberately despised them, but he didn't deliberately wait here. When they arrived in Lin, Zhou Yuanshan was on Lonely Mountain. For nearly 3 days, Zhou Yuanshan had been on Lonely Mountain. Not only him. Dongqing Hanguang, the old patriarch of the Dongqing clan, and Bai Chuyu, the younger brother of Bai Zhanfeng, the patriarch of the Bai clan, were also on Lonely Mountain. A little earlier, probably after the meeting, the news had been informed to Wu Jingmin, the deputy prime minister of the Zhongzhou cabinet, Sidu Tongyue, the governor of Kunlun City, and Yun Qinshi, the phantom sword master of Mount Shu. Everyone waited quietly, waiting for the afterglow of the old era to completely fall. Waiting for that era, the era that belonged to the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family, to completely end. Zhou Yuanshan felt that he was witnessing history every minute and second he stayed here. The sun gradually set. Dusk enveloped the sky. Several small wooden huts on the top of Lonely Mountain still stood there, guarding the Li family cemetery and the souls of heroes. In front of Li Honghe's wooden hut, the few remaining elders of the Li family all stood in front of the wooden hut. Qingye and Qi Huang, who had returned from Eastern Europe, stood in front of the crowd. Everyone had been standing for 2 days and 2 nights, and everyone's eyes were red and swollen. Great sadness, like the night, enveloped the entire Lonely Mountain. Zhou Yuanshan walked in silently. In the simple hut, Dongqing Hanguang and Bai Chuyu sat by the bed and talked with Li Honghe. Li Honghe leaned against the bed. His face seemed ruddy, but his whole body had become more and more shriveled. His eyes gradually lost all their luster and became abnormally dim. Seeing Zhou Yuanshan come in, his eyes lit up and he asked, "Gone?" His voice was a little vague and a little weak. The god of war who once stood up to the sky and supported the whole Zhongzhou state with glory. The old man who once supported the whole Li family with silence and forbearance. After all, he was old. Zhou Yuanshan felt a little uncomfortable. He nodded and said, "Fan Tianyin led the team. He Songhu and Tan Li are here." Dongqing Hanguang raised his eyebrows and said nothing. "Crown Prince, Southeast, Special Warfare." Li Honghe pointed to the outside with some difficulty. "They are all afraid." "Yes." Dongqing Hanguang whispered, "Tianlan didn't let us down. He's good. He's always the best." Li Honghe whispered with soft eyes. "Brother." Dongqing Hanguang held Li Honghe tightly. He seemed to have aged in an instant. No one knew what he thought of. He took a deep breath and whispered, "I'm sorry." Li Honghe shook his head gently and smiled. "There are some things that I can't wait for, but I still want to wait for him to come back. When he comes back, I'll inform him." Dongqing Hanguang gritted his teeth and nodded. Li Honghe closed his eyes and fell asleep. His breathing gradually became stable. Dongqing Hanguang watched quietly without saying a word. The news of Lonely Mountain was concealed. But what happened in Yuzhou, like a storm, rushed out of Yuzhou, covered the entire Zhongzhou state, and continued to spread outward. In the afternoon, the latest information spread throughout the dark world. On the morning of September 1st, Yuzhou, Dongshan Park was the starting point. Li Tianlan, the palace master of Emperor East's palace, destroyed the Tang family in Yuzhou and officially conquered the Wang family of Beihai. The eyes of the whole dark world focused on him in an instant. Everyone was watching Li Tianlan's footsteps. In the evening, the news flew all the way to Tian'an. In the afterglow of the setting sun, a tender white hand held a mobile phone and quietly looked at the information on the screen of the mobile phone. She was as still as a statue. The evening wind blew through her delicate and moving short hair, extremely gentle. She quietly looked down at the mobile phone. The sky gradually darkened. Night fell slowly. Clap. With a slight sound, the mobile phone slipped down and fell on the grass of Tian. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 626. The so-called Tianan referred to the area about 800 miles to the south, centered on the border of Nanyuan Province in Zhengzhou State. This area was about equal to the area of 6 provinces of Annan State, and about 1/10 of the total territory of Annan State. More than 3 years ago, when the rebels in Annan State rebelled, Dongqing Wudi, the god of massacre in Zhengzhou State, still sent troops to help Annan State quell the rebellion. Since then, this remote and fertile land had become a focus that could not be ignored in the Dark World. The Purgatory of Heaven Capital, the Wang family of Beihai, the Border Control Corps, the Freedom Corps, Zhengzhou State, Annan State. Countless forces, big and small, had gathered here. The skies of the heavenly south were filled with turbulent winds and scudding clouds almost every day. After the maneuver of the 2 academies in Zhengzhou State, East Emperor Palace, now Emperor East's Palace, also placed its headquarters in Tianan. Emperor Dong's palace was developing well in Tianan. Strictly speaking, the so-called not bad meant that he already had a foothold and barely managed to gain a foothold. Li Beidian, who was temporarily in charge of all the affairs of the East Emperor Palace, set up a trading company in the name of Li Tianlan as soon as possible. On the surface, it was doing the most ordinary rice business. In fact, the East Emperor Palace had become one of the important hubs of the Border Control Corps, the Blood Battalion, the Freedom Corps, and many private armed forces in Southeast Asia. This was Zhengzhou State's support for the first place in the maneuver of the 2 academies. Almost every day, a large number of weapons, armaments, and bullets eliminated by the Blood Battalion set off from the border of Zhengzhou State and were distributed to the Freedom Corps or other private armed forces through the East Emperor Palace. The standard of military equipment of the Border Control Corps was enough to make armies all over the world drool. It represented the world's most cutting-edge weapons and equipment. Even if it was obsolete, it was enough to make people envious. Swallowing it up often meant huge wealth. After all, a large number of arms transactions were handed over to a group of young people, which always made people feel that it was child's play. It was not that no one put it into action. However, in the first arms escort, the Great Void Sword Master of Mount Shu personally took action. After the Great Void Sword was unsheathed and killed 3 people at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, the business of the entire East Emperor Palace suddenly became quiet. Perhaps the 3 experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm were not famous big shots. But everyone knew that Li Beidian had not yet reached the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, and in the maneuver of the 2 academies, he had not recovered from his injury. The number of great void sword masters in the history of Shu Mountain was the least. Nirvana, Phantom, Yin Yang, and almost every generation had a sword master. Only the Phantom Sword did not appear for decades. But all the previous great void sword masters eventually reached the invincible realm, and they became the top expert of Mount Shu as soon as they entered the invincible realm. This was the unique skill of swordsmanship that shocked the Zhengzhou state. The later it was, the stronger it became. It was said that Li Beidian had another breakthrough after that battle. With him in the East Emperor Palace, even if Li Tianlan hadn't come, there weren't many forces who dared to attack it now. Wang Yuetong liked this life very much. The newly established Emperor Dong's palace was busy every day. Everyone was busy. Among the hundreds of people Wang Yuetong brought back after the maneuver of the 2 academies, almost everyone had something to do. The great cohesiveness that was produced when any force was first established would unite everyone as more and more things happened. Every day in the Southern Heaven region was very tiring, but it was also very fulfilling. Wang Yuetong was used to this kind of fulfilling and serious life every day. She learned to work hard and cultivate hard. She had not made any progress in martial arts for more than 3 years, but she had broken through to the fire-flaming realm in a short time. Everyone in the Emperor Dong's palace respected her very much. But this respect was not because she was the daughter of the Sword Emperor, nor because she was Li Tianlan's woman. It was because she was serious. She did not think about the Wang family of Beihai, nor did she miss Li Tianlan, nor did she pay attention to the grievances between them. She almost deliberately put all her thoughts on the development of the Emperor Dong's palace. Just before receiving the news, she was still planning how to completely open up the road from the Southern Heaven region to the Golden Triangle. Hundreds of thousands of armed forces in the Golden Triangle were at war all year round, so the demand for arms was even greater. And now there was something that addicts all over the world were crazily pursuing. It was not drugs. It was a special drug. In Zhongzhou State, it was code-named Dreamland. In the Dark World, it was known as Heaven. Strictly speaking, it was also a type of drug, but it was harmless to the body. The drug codenamed Dreamland could bring people greater enjoyment than other drugs. Some of the ingredients in it neutralized the harmful substances of drugs, and when combined with several other drugs, it became beneficial to the body. Although the strong hallucinogenic drug was not very suitable for strong-willed martial arts experts, the popularity of Dreamland had never decreased in the slightest throughout the world. And there was only one place in the world that could turn drugs into health supplements. Naturally, it was not the Golden Triangle. It was the Wang family of Beihai. So for many years, hundreds of thousands of armed forces in the Golden Triangle had been the most loyal allies of the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Yuetong naturally knew that. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. She even knew the price of a dream drug. The cost price of a gram of dream drug was more than 10 times that of a normal drug. But now in the Dark World, the price of a gram of dream drug was 75 times that of a gram of drugs. And the price was still rising, and it was in short supply every year. Wang Yuetong had been thinking about it recently. She wanted to do her best to fight for a share of dreams for the Emperor Dong's palace in the Golden Triangle, even if it would harm part of the interests of the Wang family of Beihai. The people she sent to the Golden Triangle to negotiate had set off. But before the specific results of the negotiation could be reported, the news from Zhongzhou State was like a basin of cold water in a world of ice and snow, pouring directly on her head. Those grievances that she thought she could deceive herself by not thinking about broke out with incomparably ferocious malice in an instant. Perhaps it was no longer grievances. The past of the previous generation would be gone with the wind. But now the woman who had been with him in Eastern Europe, who was his fiancée in name, and who desperately pulled out silence at the most critical moment, was already lying in bed. Dongqing Rushi, who was in a vegetative state. Sidutang Yue, who was seriously injured. Tribulation, whose foundation was completely destroyed. The master of Samsara Palace, who had fallen, all of them. This was a new grievance. The most uncompromising thing was hatred. So the man who woke up in Yuzhou pulled out Shenyuan's sword, which had been famous throughout the Dark World. He destroyed the Tang family, killed and injured countless elites of the Beihai Corps, and embarked on his own journey. From Yuzhou to Guqin Island, he would land in Qiushui City, the southernmost tip of Beihai Province. He would go all the way north, cross Tongtian Port, pass Queen City, and pass Kanglan City. At most, he would go through the entire Beihai Province, set foot in Xingzhou, and climb Mount Dibing. The endless lavender field, the picturesque Hualu Mountain, and the spectacular and charming beauty waterfall might all be completely trampled on. That flame had begun to burn, and it would eventually turn into the fire of war that would burn everything. This time, there would be no compromise. Because those he cared about had fallen. Because those he cared about were still lying. The sunlight fell silent. The moonlight shrouded Tian'an, drawing a long shadow under Wang Yuetong's feet. Wang Yuetong picked up her mobile phone and looked up at the clear and magnificent starry sky above her head. After a long silence, she slowly turned around and walked to Emperor Dong's palace. The temporary headquarters of Emperor Dong's palace was a manor, or it used to be a farm. There were some houses scattered on the farm. They were not gorgeous, but they were strong enough. The central villa was reserved for Li Tianlan by Emperor Dong's palace, as well as the place for daily meetings and high-level dining. When Wang Yuetong walked into the hall of the villa, everyone who was qualified to sit in the hall stood up. The head seat of the dining hall had been empty since the establishment of Emperor Dong's palace. On the left side of the head seat, Li Beidian tried his best to keep calm and greeted Wang Yuetong, but the atmosphere of laughter in the dining hall was no longer there. Everyone was the same as usual, but there was always something strange that was spreading unconsciously. Wang Yuetong sat down next to the head seat, separated from Li Beidian by an empty chair. She quietly looked at the empty seat for a long time, and then picked up her bowl and chopsticks to eat. In the past, there would be a topic at any time, but now there was a rare silence at the table. Yu Qingyan, who had the best relationship with Wang Yuetong, bit her lip, gently kicked Ning Qianxing beside her, and then slightly stepped on his foot. Ning Qianxing smiled bitterly, squeezed his girlfriend's little hand, and said nothing. As for the blood battalion, let Yuan Xing come down. Beidian, find someone to replace him. Wang Yuetong suddenly spoke, breaking the subtle silence. Li Beidian slowed down and did not speak. As for Taigu City, we have agreed to visit Mayor Yuan tomorrow. Emperor Dong's palace will have sufficient funds next. I'm optimistic about the 2 projects there, so I'd better not put them down. Qingyan, can you go there tomorrow? I hope Mayor Yuan will remember our promise. Within a month, the funds will be fully in place. Yu Qingyan raised her head and looked at Wang Yuetong in a daze, without saying anything. There's also the Freedom Corps. Han Yin, I'll have to trouble you to contact the Freedom Corps in the future. I still don't know much about the Night Tiger mercenary group, but judging from the current actions of Zhongzhou State, Night Tiger's attitude is very subtle. It is said that they have begun to contact Annan State and the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, but there is no evidence. But in many cases, we don't need evidence. They are armed forces supported by Zhongzhou State. When they are disobedient, we should give them a warning. The aid given to them this month should be reduced. I like 2 pieces of land in the neighboring town. They are very cheap. Tiannan will develop very well in the future. These 2 pieces of land are very close to the county and can be bought. In fact, if we have money, we should hoard the land. The profits in the future will not be too bad. And, in the quiet restaurant Wang, this chapter is not over. Please turn the page. Yuetong's calm and pleasant voice kept ringing. Perhaps until this moment, everyone, including Wang Yuetong herself, knew that she had done so many things. Sister, Yu Qingyan finally couldn't help shouting. Wang Yuetong's voice paused. She wanted to continue, but found that she had finished. These are all things that you are responsible for. Yu Qingyan looked at Wang Yuetong cautiously. Wang Yuetong was silent for a while. She lowered her head and drank the soup. She smiled softly and said, I'll be away for a while tomorrow, maybe. She shook her head and didn't say much. Still, no one spoke. Li Beidian lowered his head, so no one could see the expression on his face. Tianlan's attitude towards you will not change. Ning Qianxing finally couldn't stand Yu Qingyan's scratching and said helplessly, I know that. Wang Yuetong's eyes softened for a moment and she smiled. I know what kind of person he is. Then Du Hanin hesitated slightly. It's not the same. Wang Yuetong put down the bowl and chopsticks and stood up. Everyone stood up at the same time. Wang Yuetong looked at several high-level officials of Emperor Dong's palace around her. After a long silence, she chuckled. Her smile was extremely bright but bitter. It's not the same. That's my home. The Wang family of Beihai is also my home. Anyway, it's my home. Perhaps from the moment Shen Yuanfeng slashed at the Beihai core, everything became different. Wang Yuetong tried hard to smile, but her beautiful big eyes were full of faint sadness. She intended to make East Emperor Palace stronger. She even intended to let the Wang family of Beihai lose some interests for East Emperor Palace. But she couldn't watch Li Tianlan trample on everything in Beihai. She was from Beihai. Mount Dibing was her pure land. The stage of formidable person was also a holy land in her heart. Li Tianlan ignited the war in Beihai. She had to go back. She had no choice. Maybe there was a choice. But she couldn't do it. No matter what she could do, she had to go back. Those new and old grudges that she deliberately didn't see, think, or pay attention to were constantly spreading. It turned out that the peace at the moment had been shattered when the almost eternal sword fell in Eastern Europe. Wang Yuetong looked back, thinking of Li Tianlan and Tianan. Everything in the past was illusory like a dream. Now she woke up from the dream. She couldn't tell whether the dream was beautiful or cruel or something else. But like countless people in the dream, the moment she woke up, she only had reluctance in her heart. The great reluctance pulled at her heart. The pain was not obvious, but it always lasted and became a force that she couldn't resist. It pushed her to the north. Wang Yuetong stopped talking. She slowly left her seat and slowly walked out. Li Beidian and Ning Qianxing also stopped talking. The two walked in front of everyone and watched Wang Yuetong's figure getting farther and farther away. There was no farewell. Leaving was so natural, so easy, and so difficult. Li Beidian watched her figure getting farther and farther away and was silent for a long time. "She's gone." Ning Qianxing whispered. "Yes, she's gone." Li Beidian murmured to himself. In the future, Ning Qianxing's tone was complicated. "Will we meet again?" Li Beidian was silent. He thought of the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family. He thought of the era of Sword Emperor and the era that would soon belong to Donghuang. Something seemed to have been preordained in the dark. Some people struggled to get close, got close, and got close. But they could only struggle, and in the end, they could only say goodbye. "It's best not to see each other again," Li Beidian whispered. His voice was filled with countless emotions. Because at this moment, he thought of a few short sentences that eldest senior brother had sent to him. He had forgotten most of those short sentences. But 2 sentences were always deeply remembered. The silver moon moved Beihai. Donghuang broke his heart and broke his beauty. Donghuang. Broken heart. Broken. Beauty. Li Beidian took a step forward subconsciously, but finally stood where he was. The misty night shrouded. There was mist in the bright blue light, and it was a vast expanse. Everyone was looking at the back that was getting farther and farther away. Someone had ignited the war in Beihai. She walked there. Her back was so delicate, like a moth. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 627. Her white and tender fingers gently stroked the flower branch. The white petals with a little bit of red in them shook gently, looking extremely weak. The voice behind her kept ringing. It was not impatient, angry, or complacent. It was a calm and rational voice. The tender white palm moved on the flower branch again. Beautiful hands, beautiful people, and beautiful eyes. But she was always in a trance. Her crystal eyes were a little dazed, lacking a lot of calmness and peace in the past. The delicate flower petals slid down one by one as she rubbed them against her palms, landing on her long light golden skirt. The bell in the hall rang. It was almost noon. The voice behind him, who had been talking for the whole morning, finally paused. It was a little hoarse and a little helpless. "Sister-in-law?" Summer Solstice pinched a petal, turned around, and looked at Wang Xiaoyao. Wang Xiaoyao took a deep breath and calmly made the final conclusion. "So at this time, I should not go to Eastern Europe, but stay here." Summer Solstice looked at Wang Xiaoyao quietly. She had known Wang Xiaoyao for decades. It could even be said that Summer Solstice had watched Wang Xiaoyao grow up, from a child to a teenager, from a teenager to an adult, and then to a young man. The relationship between uncle and sister-in-law had always been very good. Summer Solstice still remembered that when Wang Xiaoyao was a child, he often pestered her to take him to Shenzhou City to buy a time-honored handmade candy. When he was a little older, he practiced martial arts and swordsmanship. He, who was lazy, would come to her and beg her to make his favorite sweet and sour fish. After his father left, Tianzong became stricter with his teaching. Every time he couldn't stand it, he would come here to complain to her. After they got married, Wang Xiaoyao insisted on calling her sister. Later, when he got older, he called her sister, but they were closer. When Xianxia and Yuetong were a little older, he also liked to take his nieces and nephews to play. The handmade candy shop in Shenzhou City was still Xianxia and Yuetong's favorite snack. The sika deer he gave to Yuetong was still kept in the private zoo under Mount Dibbing. Several batches of pure-blooded horses he gave to Xianxia on his birthday were old. Time kept moving forward with the traces of the past, silently. Summer solstice had never felt that time had changed anything. But when she looked at the young man standing beside her, she recalled how he used to pester her to bring him to buy candy when he was young. It was not until this moment that Xiaji clearly felt that everything had already changed. In the time that she did not pay attention to, in the place that she had not carefully observed. The young man in front of her was still handsome, but there was an indiscernible gloominess in his eyes. He stood there with a familiar smile, but the feeling he gave Xiaji was so unfamiliar. Summer solstice sighed softly and shook her head. No. Why? Wang Xiaoyao looked at summer solstice and raised his eyebrows. Sister-in-law, Xianxia can stabilize the situation in Eastern Europe. It's meaningless for me to go there. The news from the outside should have already spread here. Li Tianlan wants to go to the stage of formidable person. If I stay, at least I'll have more protection. Your brother wants you to go to Eastern Europe. Summer solstice looked at the unfamiliar Wang Xiaoyao with a smile. Wang Xiaoyao looked at summer solstice and also felt a little strange. The barrier was becoming blurry and clearer, as if it was becoming more and more real. Mount Dibing, Beihai Province, the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Xiaoyao lowered his head. Will they all be handed over to Dijiang? He still has the border control corps. Can they handle it? The pressure might be greater, but our position is not easy to begin with. Summer solstice whispered, and the situation in Eastern Europe is also very complicated. Xianxia is too young and difficult to deal with. It's also good for you to let Xianxia come back and practice with Dijiang. Xianxia, Wang Xiaoyao hesitated. He's still too young. Summer solstice's smile remained unchanged. She looked at Wang Xiaoyao and asked, "What are you worried about?" Since the establishment of the Wang family of Beihai, all the commanders of the Beihai Corps have been the core members of the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Xiaoyao whispered. It was indeed true. Please turn the page if this chapter is not over. The Wang family of Beihai had been established for 500 years. All the commanders of the Beihai Corps had no other surname. Basically, they were the most trusted younger brothers or brothers of the patriarch. And Wang Tianzong himself served as the commander of the Beihai Corps of this generation. Now Wang Tianzong was silent. Before that, he sent Wang Xiaoyao to Eastern Europe and handed over the power to Dijiang. Dijiang now controlled the entire Beihai Corps and was also the commander of the Border Control Corps, acting as the patriarch's authority. Whether in strength or power, he could be said to be unique in the Wang family of Beihai. No one could check and balance. Dijiang's identity suddenly became extremely sensitive. It's okay. Summer solstice's smile was like a mask, beautiful and a little pale. Although Dijiang's surname is not Wang, he is your brother's student. Tianzong has always treated him as his own son. Don't worry about him. How's my brother's injury? Intentionally or unintentionally, Wang Xiaoyao asked in a low voice. Not bad. Summer solstice glanced at him and continued to smile. Although that sword strike in Eastern Europe was terrible, Tianzong has broken through and become a real chosen one. He is supreme. What kind of sword strike can hurt him? The so-called eternal sword only caused him an ordinary injury. Although the injury is serious, it does not affect his combat capability. If he wants to recuperate now, it is only because if he forces to fight again, his injury will become more serious. You know, the situation is very chaotic now. He must recuperate in the fastest time. Otherwise, if it were in normal times, he would not need to recuperate at all for such a small injury. Wang Xiaoyao glanced at summer solstice and did not speak. He did not know whether his sister-in-law was telling the truth or not, but what if it was true? He lowered his head and narrowed his eyes slightly. Summer solstice felt the change in his movements, and the warmth in her eyes disappeared little by little. Sister-in-law, are you really going to drive me to Eastern Europe? Wang Xiaoyao whispered. You're treating me like an outsider. Summer solstice whispered, Eastern Europe is very chaotic. Tianzong asked you to go to Eastern Europe because he trusts your ability. At this time, how to end the chaos in Eastern Europe depends on you. As a member of the Wang family of Beihai, Xiaoyao, you should shoulder your own responsibility. Wang Xiaoyao was silent for a long time before he nodded. I actually trust Dijiang too. But I'm afraid the outside world won't think so. I'm my brother's younger brother. At this time, if I leave, I'm afraid some people will gossip. Summer Solstice looked at him with soft eyes and a soft tone. You have a clear conscience. What are you afraid of? Wang Xiaoyao suddenly raised his head and looked at Summer Solstice. Summer Solstice was also looking at him without dodging. The air seemed to freeze for a moment. After a long time, Wang Xiaoyao lowered his head again and avoided Summer Solstice's gaze. Sister-in-law, can you make me sweet and sour fish again? He was silent for a long time before he tentatively opened his mouth. Summer Solstice laughed and looked at the man who had always been her younger brother in her heart. She whispered, I'm not feeling well today. I'll wait for you to come back from Eastern Europe. Wang Tianzong lowered his head and looked at the ground. His eyes were a little sad. After a long time, he said, I'll go now. He turned around and slowly left the hall. Summer Solstice watched him leave. She stood where she was without making a sound or moving. The main door of the hall was opened for a moment and then closed again. Wang Xiaoyao stood outside the door and saw Dijiang. Dijiang, who had returned to Mount Dibbing a few days ago, was standing in the pool in front of the main hall, looking at the lotus flowers and swimming fish in the pool. Hearing the sound of the door opening, he turned his head and looked at Wang Xiaoyao. Their gazes met for a moment, but neither of them spoke. Dijiang was Wang Tianzong's student. Wang Xiaoyao was Wang Tianzong's younger brother. There was a difference in seniority. But they were about the same age. So they were friends. At least they used to be friends. They were very, very good friends. What are you doing here? Wang Xiaoyao looked at him for a while and said slowly, Now. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. You can go in. I'm not going in. Dijiang smiled and said carelessly, I'm just strolling around. What's there to stroll around? Wang Xiaoyao's eyes seemed to hide needles. There's really nothing to stroll around. Dijiang was silent for a moment and nodded. Shall I see you off? Wang Xiaoyao took a deep look at him and nodded. The two went down the mountain in silence. At the airport at the foot of the mountain, the special plane to Eastern Europe was already on standby. Today was the third time that Wang Xiaoyao had seen Summer Solstice. But there was no result. He could only go to Eastern Europe. Wang Xiaoyao suddenly remembered that he had seen Summer Solstice 3 times. Every time he came out, he could see Dijiang, no matter far or near. There were some things that he had never thought about. Until now, he realized a possibility. He laughed at himself and said, Every time I come out, I can see you. Are you afraid that I'll hurt my sister-in-law? If she doesn't want to, who can hurt master's wife? Dijiang said faintly, I'm nearby. I just hope you can calm down. Do you doubt me too? Wang Xiaoyao's voice was low. He looked at Dijiang, and his eyes suddenly became extremely sharp. Dijiang did not speak. I swear I didn't do anything wrong to the Wang family of Beihai. He took a deep breath and said word by word, gritting his teeth, I have a clear conscience. Dijiang still did not speak. He believed Wang Xiaoyao's words. He had a clear conscience to the Wang family of Beihai and did not do anything wrong to the Wang family of Beihai. He also believed that Wang Qinglei also had a clear conscience to the Wang family of Beihai and did not do anything wrong to the Wang family of Beihai. But the problem was that the Wang family of Beihai was too big. You don't believe me? Wang Xiaoyao looked at Dijiang and asked. I believe you. Dijiang's voice was calm. My sister-in-law doesn't believe me. My brother doesn't believe me. Do you believe me? Wang Xiaoyao laughed. Because we used to be friends. Dijiang said. It was not a word. This was a blade that could easily slice through everything. Wang Xiaoyao fell silent. Li Tianlan is coming. After a long time, he said slowly. I'll stop him. Dijiang answered without hesitation. Can you stop him? Wang Xiaoyao asked. Just like you are the acting patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, can you afford to carry Beihai province on your back? Dijiang glanced at him. Can you? Wang Xiaoyao did not speak. His figure was moving forward. A faintly discernible aura seemed to involve the whole world. The pure sword intent of the Wang family of Beihai spread out in an instant with a large area of the void, shaking the entire Mount Dibing. Di Jiang's figure stopped in place and looked at Wang Xiaoyao. At this moment, Wang Xiaoyao's body was straight, and his whole body was full of sword light. This was the sword light of the invincible realm. Maybe now. Maybe before. No one knew when Wang Xiaoyao had broken through and officially entered the invincible realm. Zhongzhou State had a new invincible realm expert. Beihai also had a new invincible realm expert. Di Jiang looked back at the top of the mountain. Wang Xiaoyao did not move forward. Time passed for a long time. The top of the mountain was still quiet. It was impossible for summer solstice not to feel Wang Xiaoyao's sword intent. But she did not speak. She did not let him stay. Wang Xiaoyao laughed. There was some mockery in his eyes, and he finally calmed down. Protect Beihai and Mount Dibing for me. Wang Xiaoyao patted Di Jiang on the shoulder and whispered, I always think that I am no worse than anyone, so there are some things. His voice was very low. No matter who has it, I will take it back. But it is not something that belongs to you. Di Jiang said quietly. Wang Xiaoyao waved his hand and walked to the airport. Now it is. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 628. Di Jiang looked at Wang Xiaoyao's back in silence. He didn't want to say anything else to the other party, so naturally, there was no need for them to travel together. Mount Dibing in the north gradually became cold. When the wind blew, it was bleak. Di Jiang wrapped his clothes and stood on the path on the mountainside, looking at the airport in the distance. The flashing lights of the airport became blurry because it was too far away, and the sound of the plane taking off was faint. In the end, it was submerged in the surrounding waves. The huge fuselage rushed into the sky from the lights and flew towards the north. Di Jiang pressed his lips together tightly. In the gloomy sky, his expression carried a suffocating firmness. The negotiations with the Snow Empire had already come to an end under the speculation of countless people. Zhongzhou State and the rest of the world were still working hard. But in the future map of the dark world of Snow Country, the Wang family of Beihai had become the only dominator. Wang Xiaoyao flew over. In the future, that place could be said to be his sphere of influence. But Di Jiang would never forget who helped the Wang family of Beihai take down Snow Country. Therefore, Snow Country was still not Wang Xiaoyao's understanding. It only belonged to Mount Dibing. The gloomy sky covered the sun, and a touch of darkness appeared between heaven and earth. After a short while, the rain fell with the wind, biting cold and wet. Di Jiang stood quietly for a long time, then slowly turned around and walked up Mount Dibing again. Mount Dibing was heavily guarded. The internal security forces of the Wang family of Beihai were scattered from the foot of the mountain to the top of the mountain. An opportunity with murderous intent was brewing in every corner of the mountain. The entire Mount Dibing was in a state of battle. Di Jiang walked to the top of the mountain in silence. Elite warriors came and went, and they would salute him the moment they saw him. Summer Solstice did not disclose Wang Tianzong's injury. She just said that he needed enough time to adapt to the new realm. Since the end of the chaos in Eastern Europe, Sword Emperor had traveled all over the world. Such a lie could keep the morale of the Wang family of Beihai high. In the absence of Sword Emperor, Di Jiang temporarily took over the position of patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai and exercised all the power. Di Jiang was lost in thought for a while. He hesitated and finally came to the palace where Wang Tianzong and Summer Solstice usually lived. Come in. The peaceful voice of Summer Solstice sounded in the hall. Di Jiang walked in slowly. Xiaji sat on the sofa, fiddling with a pot of flowers and plants that looked very delicate. Her white fingers were stained with mud, but they were extremely agile. Di Jiang bowed slightly and said respectfully, I am. Xiaoyao left. Xiaji pushed the flowers in front of her, looked at Di Jiang and asked softly. After he broke through, he waited for about 10 minutes. Di Jiang replied. He knew very well what Wang Xiaoyao was waiting for after the breakthrough. He had entered the invincible realm and could be said to be the strongest person except for Summer Solstice. Summer solstice was in a very bad state, so Wang Xiaoyao became the strongest and most suitable candidate to stop Li Tianlan. He hoped that summer solstice would ask him to stay. He's waited for more than 10 minutes. Maybe he's been waiting for a long time? Summer solstice was silent for a while and shook her head. Do you believe that he will make a breakthrough at this time? Di Jiang was stunned. You mean, he asked tentatively, he broke through a long time ago? Summer solstice reached out and flicked the flowers and plants in front of her. She said calmly, who knows? Di Jiang stood there, lost in thought. After a long time, he took a deep breath and muttered to himself, why, that might be the question that everyone who knew the inside story wanted to ask now. But before that, many people had noticed the hidden danger inside the Wang family of Beihai. But at that time, the hidden danger was exactly in Wang Tianzong and Wang Xiaoyao. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. Between Sigh and Thunder. No one doubted Wang Xiaoyao. No one knew what was going on with Wang Xiaoyao. Wang Tianzong had transferred Wang Xiaoyao to Eastern Europe at this time, which had deeply expressed his distrust. Why did this happen? What did Wang Xiaoyao do? The elder brother was like a father. For so many years, Wang Tianzong and Wang Xiaoyao had always had a very good relationship. It was not the kind of relationship that was pretentious, but real intimacy. Since when did Wang Xiaoyao have other thoughts? Summer solstice shook her head. It seemed that she didn't want to discuss this issue. She glanced at Di Jiang and suddenly asked, how are you going to deal with Li Tianlan? Di Jiang was now the acting patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. Any action against foreign enemies should be decided by her. I have summoned all the patriarchs of the wealthy families of the Wang family of Beihai. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we will have a meeting in the World Palace. Di Jiang looked at his watch and said, I hope you can also attend. I won't go. Summer solstice shook her head. I believe you can handle it. Di Jiang took a deep breath and nodded. Don't worry, master's wife. The dignity of the Wang family of Beihai is more important to me than anything else. More important than anything else. Summer solstice suddenly froze and asked in reply. Di Jiang was also stunned. He nodded and said frankly, yes, this is our Beihai. Summer solstice suddenly laughed. She seemed to have hesitated for a long time and finally made up her mind. She nodded and said, go ahead. Di Jiang turned and walked out of the hall. When he was about to go out, he suddenly said, Yuetong, the hatred between the Wang family of Beihai and Li Tianlan was getting deeper and deeper. Yuetong became Li Tianlan's woman. He was very worried that Yuetong would be targeted over there. Summer solstice was in a trance and whispered, she will hate me for the rest of her life, right? Di Jiang scratched his head. Summer solstice waved her hand and whispered, but so what? The dignity of the Wang family of Beihai is more important than anything else. Di Jiang went out. Summer solstice was in a daze for a while. She stood up and finally opened a mechanism in the corner of the side hall of the hall. Some ear-piercing mechanisms slowly revolved, carrying with them the countless years of time that had passed, releasing noises. A narrow passage appeared in front of summer solstice. Countless lights in the passage looked gorgeous and weird. Summer solstice entered a series of complicated passwords. In the passage, gorgeous lights flickered and finally all turned into a soft luster. Summer solstice walked in and pressed the mechanism casually. The door of the passage was closed with a harsh sound. She walked alone in the passage and slowly went down. The air became cool. The air became cold. The temperature kept dropping. The sound of surging waves gradually sounded. Summer solstice kept going down and moving forward. This passage had gone deep into the sea from Emperor Hall. In the increasingly cold temperature, a simple but extremely heavy bronze door appeared in front of summer solstice. Summer solstice calmly activated the password. The bronze door slowly shrank. The extremely strong cold air rushed out of the door in an instant. In an instant, the walls on both sides had been covered with a thin layer of frost. Summer solstice's face was slightly pale, but she still walked through the bronze door. There was a small hall at the door. 3 ice coffins were placed in the center of the hall, silent. Summer Solstice walked to the ice coffins. There was a small button in the center of the ice coffins. Through the transparent coffin lid, there was a person lying in each of the 3 ice coffins. Their eyes were closed, like corpses or sleeping. Summer Solstice looked at them in silence for a long time. She slowly reached out. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. She pressed the button in the ice coffins. In an instant, the ice coffins began to shake wildly. The surging sea outside the secret chamber kept surging, and the sound of tides was deafening. Summer Solstice's eyes were dazed and blurred. Do you also want to be free? After so many years, it's time to rest. You've worked hard. I'm sorry, she muttered to herself. Her light and crisp voice directly suppressed the sound of tides around her. The lid of the ice coffin was slowly opened. In the ice coffin closest to Summer Solstice, the person who was sleeping like a corpse opened his eyes. His eyes seemed to have lost all warmth after being frozen for so many years. He just looked at Summer Solstice coldly. What's the matter? Murder. Summer Solstice looked at him, and her eyes became more and more complicated. She took out a few printed photos and handed them to him. This person is going to die. It was a young and calm face in the photos. Li Tianlan's face. Pasu. The person in the ice coffin slowly sat up. Tianya, Summer Solstice's mouth trembled slightly, and tears fell down. She looked at the figure in the ice coffin deeply. Summer Solstice. Tianya is Summer Solstice. This was all the password, simple and complicated. The person in the ice coffin moved his head stiffly and said coldly, "The password is correct." He looked down at the photo of Li Tianlan in his hand. This person must die. Summer Solstice covered her mouth, but did not dare to cry out. The other 2 ice coffins were opened. The sleeping person sat up and walked out of the ice coffin. A powerful and chaotic aura rose around them. The eyes of the 3 people lit up with red light. This was the Devil Troop. This was the Devil Troop that belonged to Summer Solstice. 20 years ago, there were 6 people in the Devil Troop under Summer Solstice. Half of them died in the Battle of Treason, and the bodies of the remaining 3 were also seriously damaged and could barely enter a deep sleep period. Now, although they had been sleeping for more than 20 years, their state was still not perfect. There were no flukes or accidents. This time they woke up, it was the last time they fought for Summer Solstice, and it was also the last time they woke up. After that, it was eternal sleep in the endless darkness. The middle-aged man who woke up first in the ice coffin stood up and stared down at the photo of Li Tianlan in his hand. The red light shone on the photo. He seemed to have completely forgotten the existence of Summer Solstice and only remembered the order. Where is he? The middle-aged man's eyes flashed with red light. After a long time he asked. He is about to enter Qiushui City. Summer Solstice bit her lip hard, and her voice trembled. Without any hesitation, the middle-aged man put away the photo. Let's go. His voice was hard and cold. Summer Solstice couldn't bear it anymore. She suddenly threw herself on him, hugged him tightly, and burst into tears. The red light in the middle-aged man's eyes flickered constantly, and he seemed to be a little confused. After a long time, his eyes seemed to soften quietly for a moment. He reached out and wanted to touch Summer Solstice's hair. But the red light burned in his eyes again. His palm changed from enchantment to rejection. He pushed Summer Solstice out of his arms and repeated again, "Let's go." In the heavy footsteps, the 3 members of the Devil Troop slowly walked out. Summer Solstice knelt on the ground, trembling, and kowtowed to the 3 people who left. Goodbye, uncles. Her voice was a little choked. Goodbye, father. Her name was Summer Solstice. Her father. Her name was Summer Horizon. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 629. It was raining in Qiushui City. The continuous autumn rain fell from the city to the sea, knocking on the windows of the cruise ship. In the increasingly urgent sound, Li Tianlan opened his eyes. All the dreams were washed away by reality. The flames, thunderbolts, and sword lights suddenly went away without a trace. The ocean was behind. The rain shrouded Qiushui City, which was getting closer and closer. The outline of the most elegant and clean city in the north of Zhongzhou State was clear. Li Tianlan looked at it quietly. His face was pale, his breath was weak, and his spirit had fallen to the bottom. He looked extremely haggard, but his bloodshot eyes were as bright as stars. The almost dazzling light kept jumping in his eyes, like sword lights leaping in the boundless night sky. From Yuzhou to Qingdao. From Qingdao to Qiushui. Thousands of miles of road and ocean. Li Tianlan seemed to be immersed in a strange world. It was a world of swords, an empire of swords. But it was not his own world. It was Dongqing Huangtu's world. He had gotten the notebook belonging to Dongqing Huangtu before the final game in Eastern Europe. The notebook, which was copied by the master of Samsara Palace, was full of Dongqing Huangtu's experience in swordsmanship. Li Tianlan couldn't describe what it was like. Looking at the notebook, he felt like he was walking on the same path, but he inadvertently saw a different scenery. Dongqing Huangtu's description of swordsmanship confused him too much. Instead of helping him, the amazement made him more and more questions. Until he was in Winter Mountain Park. Until now. From the moment Shenyuan Feng completely shattered to the present. Li Tianlan was almost completely trapped in Dongqing Huangtu's swordsmanship. He searched for his own problems in that vast and boundless world of swordsmanship, verified Dongqing Huangtu's martial arts, and saw the real 13-story pagoda and Shenyuan Feng. Finally, he walked out of that world with great difficulty. All the questions seemed to have answers. The road ahead began to become clear. It was no longer the direction of his own speculations and experiments. Instead, in the world that belonged to the way of the sword, the streaks of sword light clearly told him what was right. Perhaps it was not until this moment that he really understood what the 13 floors was. This was not a sword array created by a paragon. From a certain point of view, the 13 floors were everything to that genius. After rocking in the ocean for a long time, the huge cruise ship slowly approached the shore. In the rain, Qiushui City was hazy and cold, like a goddess standing by the sea watching the sea. The cruise ship was full of tourists from Zhongzhou State going to Qiushui City. Beihai of Zhongzhou State and Nanhai of Zhongzhou State had always been tourist attractions of Zhongzhou State. The rich tourism resources could bring endless wealth to the Wang family of Beihai every year. Li Tianlan walked silently at the back, looking at the excited crowd in front of him. Everyone was looking forward to the grand scene. Only he longed for revenge. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. This is revenge. The best result of lying in bed was Dongqing Rushi, who was in a vegetative state. His foundation was completely destroyed, and there was almost no hope of recovery. Sidu Zongyue was seriously injured in the self-explosion of the Devil Troop. Lin Fengting was seriously injured. Countless elites of the Snowdance Corps had died with grievances. The power of the Wang family of Beihai was active in the chaos in Eastern Europe. They erased the superficial evidence, and their subsequent actions were completely unscrupulous. Why? Because they had the Sword Emperor. In his heyday, the Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State was the overall situation of Zhongzhou State. Li Tianlan walked out of the cruise ship with the crowd. The rain in the sky fell gently on his face, cool and without any trace of human life. I will protect you. The more optimistic result. Vegetative state. Li Tianlan's heart suddenly twitched, and he clenched his fists. Little by little, his somewhat lifeless eyes lost all the warmth in them, becoming cold and finally crazed. The young couple in front of him was chattering. I'm finally home. I'm free. Dongshan is also very good, and the people are also very enthusiastic. Although not as good as our Beihai, it's also good. Humph, you think it's not Dongshan that's good, right? Is it your ex-girlfriend in Dongshan? No, I think so. I saw her at your class reunion, and you talked for a long time. Why did you take me with you? Did I disturb your reunion? Ahem, don't think too much. I only have you in my heart, really. Humph, I don't want to talk to you. Where are you going? I'm going home. Don't follow me. Since you think Dongshan is good, you can go to Dongshan to find her. Don't pull me, go away. I didn't mean that. I don't believe you. You talked for so long. I'm so angry. Go away. The young and arrogant girl shook off the boy's hand and walked forward. Behind her, the boy raised his hand in a high voice helplessly. His tone was very gentle, but with an indescribable solemnity. I promise His Majesty Sword Emperor that I only have you in my heart. Don't be angry. His voice was very loud. Some tourists from Zhongzhou State looked at him in bewilderment. On the other hand, some of the North Sea locals smiled kindly. The girl named Impa looked back at her boyfriend, a little hesitant. Stop it. There's nothing between me and her. The boy chuckled softly. Then promise His Majesty that you can only be good to me in the future. Okay. The boy raised his hand and chuckled. I promise His Majesty Sword Emperor that I'll be good to you for the rest of my life. The girl's face turned slightly red. She rolled her eyes at the boy and took his palm. Li Tianlan watched this scene quietly. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. The scene. The last few words of the young couple might have given him a greater impact than when Wang Tianzong swept the entire dark world that day. Promise His Majesty Sword Emperor. Among the ordinary people in Beihai, this seemed to be the most solemn oath. It was the Real Supreme, inviolable and inviolable. This was Beihai Province. This was the most powerful place in the dark world. It was also the province with the highest happiness index and the strongest sense of belonging for the civilians in Zhongzhou State. Li Tianlan couldn't imagine to what extent a person had to be deeply rooted in people's hearts to make the civilians here regard swearing to him as the most solemn thing. Li Tianlan couldn't understand how much sincerity and effort it took to achieve this step. Promise His Majesty Sword Emperor. In a short sentence, the boy's solemnity, the girl's ease, and the smiles of the civilians in Beihai around. At that moment, Li Tianlan felt nothing but happiness and stability. Perhaps Zhongzhou State should have known this long ago. Beihai belonged to the Beihai people. The Sword Emperor belonged to the Beihai people. He stood in the highest sky of this province. For countless years, he had shouldered all the wind and rain alone. What he protected was not only Mount Dibing, but also tens of millions of civilians and nearly 200,000 square kilometers of land in Beihai Province. He had done all of this. He had used all of his means. Countless civilians in the entire province sincerely trusted him, worshipped him, and even trusted him. In Beihai, he was like the only god. This was the Sword Emperor of Beihai. In the dark world, he was an ambitious person. In Li Tianlan's eyes, he was the biggest opponent. In Zhongzhou State, he was one of the most supreme people in power. In Beihai, he was the most benevolent person. He let his people live and work in peace and contentment, and let his land be happy and stable. Was the benevolent invincible, or the invincible invincible? Li Tianlan took a deep breath. He didn't think he was qualified to evaluate Wang Tianzong now. But what the other party had done made him envious and even awestruck. Beihai Province's nearly 200,000 square kilometers of mountains and rivers, one person and one city, were all dauntless boldness displayed by a monarch over the course of more than 20 years. A breeze blew past. The drizzle fell. An atmosphere similar to but somewhat different from that of Zhongzhou State was impacting Li Tianlan's body and mind. It was the power of tens of millions of people. It was as vast as heaven and earth. It was unshakable. His figure walked across the dock and the deck. In the crowd, some people who seemed to have nothing to do in all directions locked on Li Tianlan almost at the same time. Someone took out his mobile phone. Someone left. Someone walked toward Li Tianlan. At 8 o'clock in the morning on September 2nd, Zhongzhou State. Under the gaze of countless people in the dark world, Li Tianlan, the palace lord of Emperor Dong's palace, officially set foot in Beihai Province. He landed in Xiushui City. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.